The story starts with a peaceful city facing an attack from a monstrous creature known as a kaiju. As the emergency kaiju alert blares, citizens are directed to safety zones. The colossal kaiju wreaks havoc, prompting the arrival of a defense force, which engages it in combat, aiming to stop its rampage. With previous encounters with such threats, onlookers await the response from different divisions of the defense force. The 3rd Division swiftly intervenes, deploying powerful weapons against the kaiju. Among them, a girl wielding a large cannon deals a decisive blow, piercing the kaiju and ending its life. After the chaos subsides, the protagonist, Kafka, marvels at the enormity of the defeated monster. Aware of the cleanup ahead, he informs his group that they'll be working overtime. Nearby, citizens applaud the 3rd Division for their successful mission without casualties. While the heroes depart, Kafka approaches the fallen kaiju. His duty begins post-battle, tasked with the unglamorous but essential job of dismantling and disposing of the defeated kaijus. Amidst his work, he gathers a sample of the creature for analysis. Although less celebrated than combat, their task is a battle of its own. In the midst of his duties, Kafka notices someone mishandling something hazardous, resulting in an explosion and injuring someone, underscoring the risks involved in their less glamorous but crucial work. Fortunately, Kafka is experienced in handling injuries like this, so he manages the situation skillfully. The team faces a daunting workload, and Kafka feels frustrated by the boss's expectation to clean up the massive mess within just 1 week. Suddenly, Kafka receives news that he'll be reassigned due to staffing shortage, and he's taken aback to learn he's headed to the intestines. Reluctantly, Kafka follows, while his colleagues discuss the unpleasant nature of the intestines. Upon arrival, Kafka is repulsed by the sight and smell but resolves to persevere through his discomfort to complete the task. Exhausted, he returns home that night and diligently tries to rid himself of the lingering odor from work. As he settles in, a news report featuring Division 3 and their captain, Nina, airs. At only 27 years old, Nina has not only risen to the rank of captain but also achieved numerous kaiju kills. Flashbacks reveal Nina and Kafka's friendship and their shared promise to eliminate kaiju together, evoking emotions from both. Nina's remarkable popularity and fame lead to discussions about her potential candidacy for commander of the defense force. Kafka finds himself pondering how he ended up in this situation, but the thought brings him down, so he pushes it aside. He reminds himself that cleaning is valuable work that serves a purpose and allows him to enjoy his favorite foods and live in a comfortable apartment. Thinking this should be sufficient, Kafka goes to bed. The next day at work, he meets Ikikawa, a part-time student determined to join the defense force. A colleague remarks that Kafka once shared Ikikawa's aspirations, but eventually gave up, settling into a veteran role at the cleaning company. Curious, Ikikawa asks why Kafka quit, and Kafka admits he realized his limitations despite his efforts. There's always someone better. While Kafka tries to maintain a positive outlook, Ikikawa remains resolute, declaring he'll never give up, unable to comprehend Kafka's resignation. Unwilling to engage further, Kafka changes for work, feeling frustrated that he couldn't answer Ikikawa without feeling disheartened. Reflecting on his situation, Kafka questions if giving up is truly a negative outcome. As they begin their tasks for the day, they discuss which parts to preserve for research and which to discard. Ikikawa is assigned to work on the intestines, while Kafka grapples with his thoughts about quitting and the differences between himself and the determined newcomer. Kafka appreciates Ikikawa's determination, but he's dismayed to find himself assigned to the intestines for a second consecutive day. Despite this, he resolves to demonstrate his abilities. While the boss acknowledges Kafka's diligent work ethic, he also notes Kafka's tendency to complain, recognizing Kafka's potential as a defense force officer if he had passed the exam. During their work, Kafka notices Ikikawa's lack of food and offers him a vitamin drink, insisting he eat to sustain himself. Though initially resistant, Ikikawa eventually accepts. Kafka also offers nose plugs to help with the smell, which Ikikawa declines but Kafka persists. At the end of the day, as they clean up, Kafka anticipates the most challenging part is over. When Ikikawa unexpectedly thanks him for his support, Kafka assumes he wants a rematch from their earlier wrestling match but is surprised by Ikikawa's gratitude. As Ikikawa leaves, he mentions the Defense Force's increased age limit, observing Kafka's sadness about the topic. Though Ikikawa suggests Kafka can quit if he wishes, Kafka appreciates the sentiment and acknowledges Ikikawa's understanding, realizing Ikikawa is a better person than he initially thought. Ikikawa maintains his tough demeanor, insisting to Kafka that he doesn't care, but their conversation is interrupted when a monster, known as a Yaoju, attacks Ikikawa. Kafka intervenes just in time to save him, but Ikikawa is shaken by the encounter. Kafka urges Ikikawa to flee and seek help, emphasizing that his aspiration to join the defense force would be impossible if he were to perish. Despite Kafka's insistence, Ikikawa initially refuses to leave his side. Eventually, however, he complies and runs off as Kafka leads the monster away from him. As Kafka lures the creature through the city streets, narrowly dodging its attacks, he reminisces about his past with Mina, a friend who also suffered losses due to kaiju attacks. While Kafka's primary concern was finishing his Pokémon game, Mina's sadness over the death of her cat, Miko, revealed deeper emotions. Their determination to join the defense force solidified as they witnessed the destruction caused by the kaiju, prompting them to engage in a playful competition to see who could become the most impressive officer, despite their young age and initial doubts about the idea. Kafka's determination to eradicate all kaiju together with Mina feels distant as he finds himself fleeing from the relentless monster, which ruthlessly demolishes buildings in pursuit. Despite his realization that the situation has spiraled out of control, Kafka resolves to confront the creature, focusing on attacking its vulnerable legs. However, his efforts prove futile as the monster swiftly retaliates, leaving Kafka injured and questioning why events unfolded this way. Writhing in agony as the monster's foot crushes his leg, Kafka resigns himself to his fate, only for Ikikawa to arrive in the nick of time to rescue him. Though Kafka initially berates Ikikawa for risking his life, Ikikawa's steadfast loyalty stems from his desire to fulfill his aspiration of joining the defense force. Kafka's mind flashes back to his own rejection from the defense force, fueling his self-reproach for his perceived inadequacy. As Kafka reflects on his past failure, his frustration mounts, culminating in a scream of rage just as Ikikawa faces imminent peril. Suddenly, the monster is obliterated, shocking Kafka and Ikikawa, as Mina and her team from the 3rd Division arrive to eliminate the threat. While Mina tends to the injured, Kafka is taken aback by her arrival, realizing that his friend from the past has become a formidable leader. With the immediate danger neutralized, Mina directs her team to search for any remaining threats, leaving Kafka to grapple with a mix of relief and introspection. Kafka lies in critical condition, barely responsive, as he receives medical attention. Later, at Yokohama Hospital, he reflects on Mina's remarkable display of prowess in swiftly vanquishing the monstrous threat, realizing that she has ascended to a level beyond his reach. Feeling isolated, Kafka is surprised to find Ikikawa by his side. Ikikawa acknowledges Kafka's pivotal role in saving him and guiding him to safety, emphasizing Kafka's bravery. This unexpected praise prompts Kafka to recall his rivalry with Mina to become the most impressive officer. Despite Ikikawa's belief in Kafka's potential as an officer, Kafka acknowledges that the decision ultimately lies with him. In a moment of clarity, Kafka metaphorically shakes himself awake from his negative thoughts, recognizing the need to confront his self-doubt. Expressing gratitude to Ikikawa, he acknowledges the younger man's kindness and sincerity. Though Kafka still grapples with the idea of giving up, he realizes the danger of self-deception and resolves to confront his fears head-on. With determination, he reaffirms his goal of becoming a defense force officer. However, his declaration is abruptly cut short when he is startled by the sudden appearance of a monster looming above him. The creature claims to have found him and forcefully enters Kafka's mouth, leaving him gasping for air and thrashing in distress. Concerned, Ikikawa rushes to check on Kafka, only to be stunned to find a monster in his bed. Despite the shock, Kafka tries to reassure Ikikawa, urging him to stay calm and recognize that it's still him. However, their peace is disrupted by the arrival of an elderly man summoning the defense force. Panicked by the implications of the defense force's involvement with the kaiju, both Kafka and Ikikawa fear the consequences. Reflecting on a past conversation with Mina about combating kaiju, Kafka recalls advising her on how to immobilize the creatures by targeting their legs. Assuring her that he would support her when the time came, Kafka now realizes the weight of his past assurances. Meanwhile, Mina receives word of a kaiju sighting at Yokohama Hospital and immediately resolves to confront the threat. Determined to take action, she mobilizes her team to eliminate the kaiju and protect the city. A warning blares out to alert everyone about the spotted kaiju. Inside the hospital, an elderly man quakes in terror as he faces the monstrous creature. The stress triggers a second heart attack, though judging by his condition, it seems more like his third. Ikikawa, in a stroke of brilliance, attempts to calm the elderly patient by having Kafka smile at him. However, this unexpected gesture causes the man to faint, collapsing onto the floor on the verge of rigor mortis. Concerned, Kafka rushes to check on the old man, but his gentle touch unexpectedly shatters the wall, startling both him and his student. As other patients emerge to investigate the commotion, they catch only a fleeting glimpse of the monster before the defense force arrives. Sensing the impending danger, Kafka and Ikikawa decide to make a hasty escape. Kafka bolts towards the window, forgetting his own strength, and inadvertently tears through the wall. Ikikawa manages to leap onto a nearby platform just in time, but Kafka, taking a single step, is launched through the air like a jumbo jet. Meanwhile, the defense force receives word that the Kaiju is retreating from the hospital and heading towards an evacuated area. With the Kaiju on the move, Kafka and Ikikawa sprint as fast as they can, relying on their own legs to carry them to safety. Ikikawa ponders silently how his mentor could possibly be a Kaiju, questioning the feasibility of such a transformation. When he turns to confirm Kafka's identity, his eyes widen in shock at the sight of his teacher morphed into an even more grotesque creature, akin to some kind of special mode. A strange appendage emerges from Kafka's mouth, swiftly snatching a nearby bird and devouring it raw for sustenance, much to Ikikawa's disgust. Surprisingly, the impromptu meal triggers Kafka's reversion to his original Kaiju form. As they flee, Kafka suddenly feels the urge to relieve himself, prompting Ikikawa's confusion as to how this is possible without the proper anatomy for urination. To their horror, Kafka expels urine from 2 spots on his chest, a bizarre lactation of yellow liquid. Distraught and fearing social rejection, Kafka collapses in tears, worried about his prospects for marriage and joining the defense force. Eventually, they reach their destination. Ikikawa assumes that once they enter, the area will be empty due to the evacuation. However, just before they leap over, Kafka senses something approaching. Ikikawa wonders if it's the defense force, but Kafka informs him that the presence is underground. Suddenly, they catch sight of a Kaiju emerging. The appearance of the monster alerts the unit on their way to handle the initial sighting. Mina instructs one unit to proceed while she investigates the new location. As they head there, Kafka recognizes the Kaiju as the same type that attacked earlier. Ikikawa deduces that fewer reinforcements will be sent to their location, providing them an opportunity to conceal themselves. Despite the evacuation of the area where the new Kaiju appeared, there seems to be a complication: the sound of a girl crying from beneath the rubble. Her mother is trapped, and the girl struggles to lift the debris. Unfortunately, lacking the strength to move it, she is unable to rescue her mother. The mother urges her daughter to flee, but the determined girl insists on trying to save her. As the failed rescue attempt unfolds, the Kaiju emerges and targets the girl. However, a powerful punch suddenly strikes the monster, sending it flying. Kafka marvels at his strength and rushes over to check on the girl's well-being. Understandably, she is frightened by the presence of the monster. Kafka tries to reassure her with a smile, but it only adds to her fear. Finally, Ikikawa arrives, and Kafka lifts the slab off the unconscious woman. Assuring the girl that her mother will be fine, Ikikawa advises her to stay calm. Meanwhile, the previously defeated monster returns for another round. Kafka instructs Ikikawa to evacuate the civilians while he prepares to deliver a powerful blow. After charging up his energy, Kafka delivers a punch that obliterates the monster, reminiscent of Saitama's feats. The creature's essence rains down, staining the ground red. Despite his heroic actions, the girl remains fearful of Kafka. As Kafka walks away, the girl expresses her gratitude, triggering memories of Mina's appreciation. Determined not to abandon his goal of joining the defense force and protecting Mina, Kafka's human form partially returns as he vows to fulfill his promise to his childhood friend. When the defense force finally arrives, they find themselves perplexed by the aftermath of the event, with even the tiger appearing bewildered. Mina approaches the girl to inquire about the Kaiju she encountered. However, the girl trembles in fear, so the soldier assures her that she will eradicate all the Kaiju. This reassures the girl, but she pleads with Mina not to harm the good Kaiju who saved her mother. This revelation leaves Mina utterly bewildered, rendering her speechless. 3 months later, a news broadcast displays a drawing based on eyewitness testimony of a Kaiju named Number 8, which piques the defense force's keen interest as they continue their nationwide search for it. Kafka's co-workers watch the broadcast, while Ikikawa, aware of the situation, stands in the background. He recalls receiving a letter addressed to him and Kafka, with instructions to deliver Kafka since he left early for work. The letters contain the results of the exam they took, revealing that Kafka used to participate in it annually. Ikikawa opens his letter and finds that he passed the first round. He takes Kafka's letter with him, but curiosity gets the better of him, and he opens it on the way, discovering that Kafka also passed. The crew looks on happily, knowing Kafka has another chance to pursue his dream, though it's his last opportunity, as he won't be able to enter again after this. Ikikawa arrives and shares news with his master, but when Kafka turns around in his monster form, his student drop kicks him out of anger for exposing himself. He's especially upset because Kafka appeared on the news, prompting Ikikawa to caution him to be more careful and conceal his transformation, as they successfully did at the hospital. Reviewing his results, Kafka isn't as excited because he consistently fails the second round of exams. Passing the first round isn't anything new to him. Concerned for the next stage, which will have officials present, Ikikawa warns Kafka of the risk of being killed if he transforms. Despite the danger, Kafka is willing to take the risk, having tirelessly searched for a way to revert to normal without success, especially now that he's 32 and unlikely to get another chance. Ikikawa reluctantly agrees to support his teacher's decision, but warns Kafka that if anything goes wrong, he'll leave him behind and continue the program alone. He suggests they proceed as rivals. However, when Kafka struggles to open his water bottle, he involuntarily transforms again, prompting Ikikawa to advise him to skip the exam. Despite Kafka's assurance that he'll have it under control, Ikikawa insists he gets a grip and then walks away. On the day of the second round, the duo arrives at the Defense Forces base in Takekawa, completely awed by its grandeur. Ikikawa observes that the base they've arrived at is larger than the one they visited on a field trip, prompting Kafka to explain that Takekawa's base is shared with the Self-Defense Forces garrison, enabling quick deployment of forces across western Tokyo when needed. As other candidates start arriving, one of them takes issue with where Kafka has parked. She demands Kafka, whom she mockingly calls an old man, to move his car so she can park there, despite ample space elsewhere. Kafka takes offense and threatens to teach her a lesson, but the girl reveals a suit granting her super strength, allowing her to lift and toss the company car. Ikikawa is curious about her identity. She introduces herself as Kikoru Shinomiya, whose hobby is hunting down kaiju. While Iua seems to recognize the last name, Kikoru's attention is solely on Kafka, telling him he smells like a kaiju after sniffing him with her powerful nose. Kafka introduces himself as examinee number 2032 and impressively instructs the kid to remember his name. However, his grand introduction is interrupted when he notices that Kikoru's butler has taken his parking spot. Initially, Kikoru expected the exam to be dull, but she finds it increasingly interesting. She expresses determination to outshine Kafka and departs. Ikikawa is angered by Kafka's premature use of his powers, but Kafka defends himself by noting that he only transformed a part out of sight. They reassure some guards that the noise was insignificant, but Ikikawa warns Kafka that any further antics will result in him being sent home. Realizing that this is his final opportunity to stand beside Mina, Kafka resolves not to give up this time. However, moments later, Kafka struggles immensely during the exam. Despite his consistent training and rigorous physical regimen, he finds himself unable to keep pace. A flashback reveals Ikikawa explaining that the second stage of the exam consists of two parts, a fitness test and an aptitude test. As they cannot alter their aptitude, their focus should be on excelling in the fitness test. Unfortunately, Kafka is having extreme difficulty. He has always been somewhat below average, but his performance has significantly worsened. Falling further behind, Kafka wonders if people truly become this weak after turning 30. Despite considering transforming, he dismisses the idea as absurd. Regrettably, Kafka performs poorly and receives a rank of 219 out of 225. Kikoru then reveals that she secured the 5th rank, taunting Kafka for how swiftly she outperformed him. Kafka reflects on how he initially made a dramatic statement about remembering his name to Kikoru, but now he wishes she would forget it. Ikikawa expresses relief that Kafka refrained from using his power, and Kafka acknowledges that it wouldn't have been fair since everyone worked hard to reach this point. Although Kafka made his previous statement to appear confident, he secretly wishes he had used his powers. Kafka is confident that he would have performed better if he had used his power, but Ikikawa suspects there may be another reason for Kafka's low rank. Meanwhile, Mina reviews this year's applicants with her subordinate. Despite his assumption that Mina is only concerned with eliminating Kaiju, he is surprised when she expresses interest in learning more while she continues working. Her subordinate highlights a candidate named Nezumo, who graduated at the top of his class and is considered highly promising. Ikikawa also notices Nezumo, who ranked second. The third-ranked candidate is Iharu, the valedictorian of a prestigious university. The top-ranked applicant is Kaguragi, a rising star in the Japan Ground Self-Defense Force. These candidates, along with many others this year, hail from top universities, indicating a departure from the usual path of aspiring to become elite officers. Kafka attributes his low rank to the presence of such highly skilled applicants. Ikikawa notes that among these talented individuals, one person stands out, Kikoru. Kikoru graduated from California Neutralization at just 16 years old, skipping grades and becoming the youngest ever to do so. She is regarded as the greatest talent ever and is being closely watched by the top candidates, who hope to measure up to her. Ikikawa emphasizes that the group of applicants is exceptionally skilled, with Kikoru being particularly noteworthy. Kafka expresses surprise at Kikoru's impressive ability, but he ends up being reprimanded by her bodyguards for touching her. Onlookers assume Kafka is one of her admirers. Despite being teased by Kikaru, Kafka vows to prove himself. However, he privately acknowledges that things aren't going well, though Ikikawa remains hopeful. In the past 2 years, the second part of the test involved disposing of kaiju corpses. This tests the examinee's knowledge of kaiju and their ability to work as a team. It also demonstrates that the job entails more than just defeating kaiju. Ikikawa decided to work part-time at the disposal unit because of this aspect of the test. Kafka's optimism is renewed, and they decide to focus all their efforts on the next part of the exam. Upon arriving at the second training area, they are greeted by Hoshina, the vice captain of the 3rd Division. He explains that he will oversee the aptitude test, which involves locating kaiju. Kafka's excitement turns to shock when Hoshina reveals that they not only have to find the kaiju but also neutralize them. This surprises Kafka, especially when a powerful kaiju attempts to attack Hoshina, only to be stopped by security measures. Despite his initial shock, Kafka notices that the top applicants are eager for this part of the exam. However, Kikaru laughs at Kafka's reaction, prompting him to question why they can't just dispose of the kaiju's bodies as before. Ikikawa shares Kafka's disappointment, explaining that disposal was the norm in previous years. Hoshina emphasizes the danger of this part of the exam and informs them that they will be provided with Izumo tech gear for protection. Ikikawa tries on the gear and is impressed as it analyzes his body and adjusts to fit perfectly, enhancing his strength and becoming like a second skin. These suits are Demon Defense Force combat suits made from organic material extracted from kaiju, significantly increasing the wearer's combat abilities. In another location, Konami, the division operator, announces that she will begin measuring the combat power of those wearing the suits. She reveals that Ikai's combat power is at 8%, Izumo's at 18%, Kaji's at 15%, and Ihai's at 14%. This unleashed combat power indicates how much of the suit's potential power the wearer can utilize. Normally, even after extensive training, it's only around 20%, and it's rare to have an applicant score above 10% in a year. However, all 3 of these guys are over 10%, prompting Hoshina to wonder if this year will be unprecedented. Suddenly, everyone is stunned as Konami reveals that Kikuru's unleashed combat power is at 46%. This astonishes everyone, with Hoshina considering her to be at the level of a platoon leader despite not yet joining the force. It's assumed to be a record-breaking achievement. While Ikikawa feels disappointed with his 8%, Hoshina reassures him that it's still commendable for a first attempt. As long as the examinees don't score a 0, they will pass. Hoshina admits he's never seen a 0 before. However, the mood shifts when Kafka's unleashed combat power is revealed to be 0%. This surprises everyone, leading to laughter and even speculation about a possible error by Konami. Kafka asks for more time, hoping to increase his combat power. However, Hoshino finds the situation amusing, comparing it to something as simple as using the bathroom. He appreciates Kafka's determination, but doubts he'll succeed in passing the exam. Kafka believes there might be a method to boost his percentage and diligently tries to discover it before the exam concludes. Kaiju becomes frustrated with his efforts, wishing he would demonstrate the same power he showed in the parking lot. As Hoshina enters the room, he announces the beginning of the final part of the exam. He reveals that their targets are 1 Hanju and 36 Yaoju, positioned throughout an urban training area. These kaiju caused 16 casualties and were captured alive for training purposes. Examinees will engage them with anti-kaiju weapons, while drones monitor their progress. If an examinee is in danger, their suit shield will activate to protect them, but this will result in exam failure. Given the high risk, Hoshina emphasizes that survival is not guaranteed. Examinees must decide whether to participate, and Hoshina initiates the test. Despite the danger, Kikuro boldly leads the charge, swiftly defeating 2 Yaoju and impressing everyone. Kafka urges them to move forward quickly to avoid falling behind, but Ikikawa points out that Kafka is the one slowing them down. Kafka defends himself by explaining that the weapons are too heavy without the suit's assistance. He tries to make it seem impressive by suggesting that only as the Zero can understand this, but Ikikawa disagrees. Their situation looks bleak as Ikikawa highlights their lack of offensive power compared to the others. Just then, Hoshino announces that Mina has arrived to observe the exam. Kafka recalls their previous challenge to determine who could become the more impressive Defense Force officer, and he regains his composure. He decides to disregard being labeled a Zero and focuses on seizing this final opportunity. Kafka realizes something and asks Ikikawa why they are being monitored by drones. He suggests that if their purpose was simply to track how many kaiju each examinee eliminates, sensors would suffice. However, this isn't the case. In addition to evaluating their ability, the exam is assessing their adaptability to different situations. They both understand that, lacking offensive capability, their role is to support the attackers as effectively as possible. Spotting a nearby altercation, they position themselves to offer assistance. Kafka spots the hooves of the Kaiju, recognizing it from a previous cleanup operation. His experience proves valuable as he recalls that stun grenades are highly effective against this type of Kaiju, which has poor eyesight but keen hearing. Once deafened, they become vulnerable targets. Drawing from his expertise, Kafka instructs Izumo to target the Kaju's stomach, its weak spot. The attackers follow his advice, successfully defeating the creature. Grateful for Kafka's support, they express their appreciation, though Kafka is still bothered by being labeled as Kikuro's follower. In the observation room, Kafka and Ikikawa's actions catch the attention of the observers. Kafka points out to Ikikawa that they have dismantled numerous kaiju bodies, gaining valuable knowledge in the process. Feeling confident in their ability, Kafka is relieved that he doesn't need to rely on his kaiju power anymore. He becomes excited at the prospect of redeeming himself for past mistakes. However, their optimism is short-lived when another kaiju suddenly appears. It sends Kafka crashing into a building, and Konami detects severe injuries. Unable to continue the battle, Kafka is at the mercy of the approaching Kaiju, prompting them to activate his suit shield. Kafka realizes that they're likely to activate the shield, which would result in his failure in the exam. Aware of Mina's presence, he musters all his strength to get up. Determined not to embarrass himself in front of her any further, he prepares to face the approaching beast. Meanwhile, Konami initiates the remote shield activation, and Hoshino reflects on his prediction that Kafka would be the first to drop out. Despite finding Kafka amusing, Hoshino feels disappointed by his early exit. However, just as the Kaiju is about to attack Kafka, it is suddenly obliterated. Hikaru notes that she has outdone Kafka once again and asserts that nobody quits while she's on the battlefield. Ignoring Kafka's awe, she insists that he stay down like a loser while she continues to take down more kaiju. Witnessing Kikaru's prowess, the other examinees are amazed but refuse to let her monopolize all the action. Kikaru effortlessly dispatches another Kaiju, leaving Iharu to wonder if she's using the same suit as them given her incredible power. Kafka desires to pursue the main target, but his leg is fractured, rendering him unable to stand. Hoshino discloses that Kafka has multiple fractures and potential organ injuries. Despite this, Kafka refuses to entertain thoughts of giving up. Recalling the despair of seeing his 0% combat power, Kafka reflects on his belief that only the talented succeed, which frustrates him. Hoshino suggests Kafka withdraw from the exam, cautioning that the suit shields are not infallible. However, Kafka remains resolute, asserting his autonomy in deciding whether to persevere. Despite feeling too old for aspirations and fearing ridicule, Kafka resolves to stake his entire life on his dreams once more. As Kafka voices his determination, the observers are astonished to see a marginal increase of 0.01% in his combat power. Kafka reaffirms his commitment not to surrender this time, regardless of the challenges, catching Mina's attention. Kafka makes a firm declaration that he won't give up this time, catching Mina's attention. Despite his broken leg, Kafka proudly stands, astonishing Konami. Hoshino agrees to let Kafka proceed but warns that he'll activate the shield if things go south. Kafka tells Ikikawa to go on without him as planned, but Ikikawa decides to support him instead. Realizing Ikikawa's true character, Kafka accepts his assistance. Hoshino finds amusement in their situation as Ikikawa carries Kafka, though Ikikawa feels embarrassed. Despite Kafka's pain from his broken bones, Ikikawa offers to be their legs while Kafka uses his knowledge to handle the attacks. Hoshino, finding their interactions comedic, just wants to move past them. Kafka instructs Ikikawa to follow Kikaru, impressed by his friend's speed. Meanwhile, Kikaru races ahead, defeating Kaiju and leaving her companions behind. Ikikawa advises Kafka to be prepared to aid her once they catch up. As they observe Kikaru's actions, the others feel disappointed that they can't assist her. Konami announces that Kikaru has eliminated the last Kaiju in the area, and is now battling the Hanju. Kikaru agitates the beast with a grenade, positioning herself for a decisive strike. Kikaru calmly remarks that this is the final one as she slowly pulls the trigger, prompting Hoshino to smirk as she shoots into the monster. Konami is amazed as she declares that the Hanju is defeated, marking the completion of the exam's last stage. The boys are shocked that they couldn't assist, with Kafka stating that Kikaru is simply too fast. Now, Konami only needs to retrieve the drones and send medics for the injured. Hoshino is surprised at how quickly the exam ended despite the lengthy setup. Mina is impressed by Kikaru's remarkable power, even catching Hoshino's attention. Although it was expected that at least 30 people would drop out, none did, and Hashina attributes this to Kikaru's influence. Given that she is Director Shinomiya's daughter, such performance is expected. Hashina is confident that she will become a significant figure in the defense force, offering hope for the entire country. Meanwhile, Kikaru hopes she made her father proud by excelling on the battlefield. She relaxes, intending to tease Kafka further, but is suddenly shocked as a strange being appears behind her, causing massive damage instantly. Everyone is horrified as the fallen kaiju begin moving again. Kikaru barely managed to shield her heart by concentrating her shield's energy on one spot, but she resolves to keep fighting. She's astonished when the mysterious monster starts speaking and questions how she can still stand. Recognizing it as a kaiju, Kikaru is taken aback by its intelligence. Despite her intention to attack, the monster swiftly strikes her multiple times, causing Kikaru to cry out in pain. Konami observes her vital signs dropping, puzzled by the situation. They detect life signals from the supposedly defeated kaiju, but what's truly alarming is that the revived Hanju's strength is estimated at level 6.4, significantly higher than before. Realizing that such a powerful foe requires a full company to defeat, Hashina reflects on the limited number of capable individuals. At Mina's urging, Konami activates remote shields for the examinees and recalls some drones. Recognizing their own capability to confront the Hanju, Hashina and Mina prepare to engage it. Despite evacuation orders, Kikaru adamantly refuses to leave, feeling responsible for preventing further casualties. She uses her suit's capabilities to staunch the bleeding, determined to continue the fight. At that moment, Kikaru recalls her father's admonition to strive for perfection for the nation. Motivated by this ideal, she demands nothing less than perfection from herself. However, her resolve is swiftly shattered as the Hanju easily knocks her aside, leaving her barely able to move. Despite her dire condition, she staunchly refuses to admit defeat. Reflecting on her past, Kikaru recalls the pride she felt upon achieving the top grade in her class. While other students celebrated with their parents, her own father's response was indifferent. He emphasized the fleeting nature of success and urged her to focus on future goals rather than dwelling on past achievement. Her father's relentless pursuit of perfection, driven by a sense of duty to the nation and the memory of her late mother, continues to influence her actions. With his words echoing in her mind, Kikaru resolves to persevere. Determined to heed her father's teachings, she refuses to allow anyone to surpass her and fights back with all her remaining strength. Even with just one arm functional, she remains steadfast in her determination to fight. Despite her valiant efforts, the relentless onslaught proves too much, and she is once again overwhelmed by excruciating pain, her screams echoing her anguish. Suddenly, one of the drones detects the Hanju, and Konami is astonished to witness the regeneration of its severed offensive unit organ. Concern clouds Hashina's expression as Konami identifies the creature's preparation for a devastating attack. Despite their urgency, Hashina and Mina rush to the scene, uncertain if they will arrive in time. As the beast readies its formidable assault, Kikaru resigns herself to her seemingly inevitable fate. Overwhelmed with remorse for not meeting her father's expectations of perfection, she tearfully apologizes. However, just as the Hanju prepares to unleash its onslaught, Kikaru is astonished by Kafka's sudden appearance and words of encouragement. Bewildered by his presence, she braces for the monster's attack. To her astonishment, the attack fails to harm them, and Kafka begins a startling transformation. Commending Kikaru for her efforts in buying time for the evacuation, Kafka assures her that he will handle the situation from here. Meanwhile, frantic evacuations take place elsewhere, with Kaguragi impressing Nezuma with his strategic use of flares. A flashback reveals that Kafka and Ikikawa were ordered to evacuate moments early, with strict instructions not to return as Kikaru confronted the revived Hanju. While Ikikawa was prepared to comply, Kafka had already disappeared. Ikikawa hoped that Kafka hadn't resorted to his transformative ability, knowing the consequences if he had. As Ikikawa rushes to the scene, he realizes that Kafka is indeed bold enough to transform without hesitation in such dire circumstances. Meanwhile, Kikaru is utterly stunned by Kafka's transformation, unable to comprehend how he could be a kaiju. However, Kafka reassures her that he is still himself and pleads with her not to inform the defense force. Suddenly, Kikaru is filled with terror as the Hanju unleashes its immensely powerful attack once more, but Kafka effortlessly deflects it. Promising to explain everything shortly, Kafka assures Kikaru that he only needs a moment to defeat the beast. Just then, Konami detects an exceptionally powerful energy source near the Hanju. With their communication disrupted by the explosion, they have no visual confirmation but receive a reading on the creature's fortitude, which Konami finds hard to believe. Supposedly, this mysterious creature possesses a fortitude of 9.8, leading Hashina to dismiss it as impossible, attributing the anomaly to the explosion's effects. Acknowledging the significance of such a high fortitude, Hoshina speculates on the potential implications if it were true, hinting at the creature's unprecedented strength. Meanwhile, Kafka powers up to match the immense power of the Hanju. Apologizing to the creature, Kafka acknowledges his dwindling time and prepares to end the confrontation with a single punch. As Kikaru watches in awe, Kafka's punch meets the Hanju's, resulting in the annihilation of the beast. The shock on Kikaru's face is palpable as the Hanju's body parts scatter in all directions. Kafka feels satisfied with his actions and jests with the monster to see if it can revive after his attack. However, when the creature begins moving again, Kafka hastily implores it to cease, clarifying that he was only joking. Despite his initial uncertainty, the monster is truly defeated. Kikaru, witnessing these events, can't help but ponder who this enigmatic individual is. As another Yaoju threatens Kikaru, Kafka intervenes and unveils his face, assuring her safety. However, he admonishes her for recklessly endangering herself. Their conversation is interrupted by Ikikawa's arrival, who reprimands Kafka for his risky actions. Kafka explains that he initially intended to transform only a part of his body, but altered his plan upon encountering the Hanju. Despite Ikikawa's scolding, their discussion halts when Kikaru faints. Shortly afterward, Mina and Hoshina reach the scene, perplexed by the extent of the damage inflicted on the Hanju. Konami's report of Kafka's safe exit signals the completion of the evacuation. While acknowledging Kikaru's strength, Hoshina doubts she could have single-handedly obliterated the Hanju. Mina observes the anomalies of the revived Kaiju in the blast area, highlighting the mysteries surrounding the situation. She orders an investigation unit to examine the area, while she and Hoshina eliminate the remaining Yaoju. Reflecting on the similarities to an incident 3 months prior, Hoshina speculates about possible connections. Later, Kafka finds himself back in another hospital. Ikikawa updates him on Kikaru's recovery, noting that she's receiving treatment using the Defense Force's top technology. Reflecting on the exam, Kafka realizes the challenge of competing against exceptional individuals. It reinforces the notion that pursuing one's dreams often means facing tough competition. Despite this, Kafka acknowledges the excitement that comes with chasing dreams, regardless of the obstacles. He expresses gratitude to Ikikawa for his encouragement. Suddenly, Jesta and Mina unexpectedly appear to express gratitude for Kafka and Ikikawa's assistance in escorting Kikaru to safety. They depart swiftly, leaving Kafka contemplating reaching out to Jesta. Deciding against it for now, Kafka resolves to wait until he achieves his goal of becoming an officer. He feels more confident than ever in this aspiration, silently vowing to prove himself to Jesta. Nearby, Kikaru experiences a nightmare about failing to meet her father's expectations of perfection. Upon waking, she wonders if her father has arrived, only to find Hoshina by her side. He reassures her that there are no casualties, attributing the successful outcome to her defeat of the Hanju. Kikaru's surprise prompts Hoshina to question if she truly defeated the creature. Kikaru recalls Kafka's words and confidently asserts that she was the one who defeated the Hanju. That night, a news report recounts the events of the exam, highlighting the injuries sustained but emphasizing the absence of fatalities. Meanwhile, in a restroom stall, the intelligent and mysterious Kaiju eavesdrops on the news, expressing surprise and disappointment at the lack of casualties. Suddenly, the phone rings, prompting the monster to remind himself how to answer it. Upon answering, the voice on the other end instructs him to return to duty. The monster transforms, dons a uniform, revealing himself to be a new member of Kafka's disposal unit. As concern lingers for Kafka and Ikikawa's well-being following the exam, the new recruit ominously conceals his transformation. At the hospital, Ikikawa mentions that Kafka is starting to appear dependable. However, once they return to work, he retracts his statement. Kafka, feeling terrified, blames Ikikawa for encouraging him to retake the exam. Ikikawa points out that he was expressing gratitude for that at the hospital, and their argument is interrupted when they receive letters. The guys prepare to open them and agree to do so simultaneously. After thinking about catching up to Mina, Kafka is shocked by his exam results. Later, at the Defense Force base, the students who passed the exam gather. They notice Kikuro's absence, but aren't surprised by the results. The room falls silent as Kikuro enters, revealing she got the top score. Izumo had anticipated ranking first before the exam, but he now assumes they'll have to vie for second place. However, Kaguragi disagrees. Having scored highest on the fitness exam, he still aims for the top spot. Ikikawa introduces himself to Iharu, who wonders where Kafka is. Assuming Kafka didn't pass, Ikikawa looks worried. Just then, Mina arrives to start the introduction ceremony, and Kikuro is chosen to speak on behalf of the incoming class. The 27 of them are now considered officers of the Defense Force, and Kikuro declares they'll lay down their lives for the cause. Kakuro is then shocked when Mina personally thanks her for saving everyone during the exam. Kakuro becomes really sad, knowing Kafka should be hearing these words, and wonders why he isn't there. He not only saved her life but also worried about her as if she were a little girl. She becomes enraged, feeling completely humiliated, and still seeks answers as to why he transformed into a kaiju. Just then, everyone is shocked as Kafka arrives late to the ceremony. It turns out that Kafka actually failed the exam. He scored the lowest on the fitness exam and received a 0 on his aptitude test. During a meeting over who would pass, Mina was about to say something about Kafka, but Hoshina interrupts and declares that he will take Kafka. Kafka's numbers say that he doesn't have what it takes to be an officer, but what he showed on the battlefield says otherwise. Kafka was able to locate the enemy's weak points, and he prioritized helping others over his own kill count. Most importantly, though, Kafka really made him laugh. Hoshina isn't sure if Kafka will ever become a full officer, but he will bring him into his platoon as a cadet so he can receive more training. Mina now explains that he's enrolling as a cadet, so she had him skip the introduction ceremony. Kiku is glad to hear it, and the top guys are too. Mina then gives a speech about how the kaiju are getting stronger, and she won't be able to guarantee the survival of the new officers. However, she vows to stand at the very front so she can act as both their shield and spear. Kafka gets really caught up in her speech and loudly declares that he will be standing next to her soon. Everyone is shocked as they call him crazy for calling the captain by her first name. First speaking out of turn, Mina tells him that he owes her 100 push-ups, but he thinks about how it was an accident. Hoshino laughs uncontrollably and points out that Kafka is already back at his funny ways. Mina leaves, but Hoshina wonders if he just saw her smile a little bit. Konami can't believe that Kafka's already bringing the comedy, but Hoshina explains that this place can get pretty gloomy, and they need a guy like him. However, Hoshina secretly has another reason for keeping Kafka around. He noticed something strange when they detected the 9.8 fortified kaiju. Hoshino still believes that it was just a busted sensor, but what he noticed is that someone's vitals stopped coming in at the same time. This person was Kafka, so Hoshino thinks that there's something strange about him. He has decided to keep Kafka close so he can find out what that something is. Down below, everyone cheers on the old dude as he completes the 100 push-ups. Kiker wants to speak with him, so the guys assume that she wants to confess her love. She denies that, so Kafka assumes that it's one of those meet me after school behind the gym kind of things. Kikaru denies that as well and just tells them to come with her. He does, and Kikaru is shocked when Kafka reveals that a kaiju forced itself into his mouth. Kafka wonders if he can just tell the defense force the truth as they might be able to cure him. Kikaru is sure that it's a terrible idea since if they don't eliminate him on the spot they will surely make him spend the rest of his life being tested and having experiments done on him. Even worse, she has heard a rumor about what they do with kaijus powerful enough to get a number. Here's what's next. After they are defeated, their body parts are used for a special weapon. Kikaru fears that this will happen to Kafka, so he begs her to keep his secret. She agrees to do so, but if he ever tries to harm humanity, she vows to end his life. Everyone gets very serious, but Kafka's actually counting on her to do that if things go bad. Later, everyone watches as Ikikawa performs a training exercise. He completes it in just over 2 minutes and a half, and it is announced that his estimated unleashed combat power was 18%. Everyone gasps in amazement, and Hoshina is impressed by how much he has grown in such a short period of time. Ahiro can't believe that Ikika would just set another personal best score, so he jumps into the exercise next. He goes real hard as he refuses to be outdone. Ahiro finishes in 2 minutes and 15 seconds, with an unleashed combat power at 20%. Ahiro is really pleased with himself, and he tells Ikikawa to not get too cocky. Just then everyone is absolutely stunned as Kikaru finishes in 1 minute and 15 seconds with an unleashed combat power at 55%. Hikaru taunts the boys as both their scores combined are still worse than hers, and Nezumo can't help but feel average around her. Kaguragi points out that he doesn't have time to worry about those better than him as he now has the same combat power as him. Nezumo promises that he will set a new best when it's his turn, and all the powerful rivals stare at each other with great intensity. However, the intense moment is broken up when an exhausted Kafka finishes the exercise in 6 whole minutes and has a combat power of 1%. Kafka is actually really happy about this as he has turned the 0% from before into a 1. Kafka demands that Kikaru praise him, but Hoshino points out that he will never become a full officer at this rate. In fact, he will probably be fired in just 3 months. Hoshina has them all run 10 laps and gives them an extra 5 for complaining about it. Konami can tell that there are a lot of rivals in this class, and Hoshina's glad that they're all pushing each other to become better. Afterwards, the guys are all exhausted and Nairu tries to argue with Ikikawa about who has bigger muscle. Kafka tells the kids to stop arguing and shows them the muscles of a hardworking grown-up. Kafka can't hold his stomach in for long though, and Iharu points out that he can't join the defense force with a spare tire like that one. Kafka tells them all that it will happen to them too after they turn 28, and demands that they arm wrestle him to see who is stronger. Just then, they are all put to shame when Kaguragi enters the room with his bulging muscle. In the laundry room, the girls in the class are shocked to find Mina. Kikaru admires how in shape she is, but she knows that alone doesn't explain her amazing combat power. Kikaru would like to know what kind of training she has done, so Mina instructs her to stand next to her. Kikaru is shocked that Mina wants to show her right now, but she eagerly agrees to do it. Back at the bath, the guys discuss why they decided to join the defense force. Iharu was saved by Captain Mina as Shiro, so he always wanted to be a hero like her. All the other guys share the same desire to become heroes because of her. Kafka is amazed about her inspiring so many people, and Ikikawa points out that she is their generation's superhero. They all want to know Kafka's reason, and they are shocked to learn that he was childhood friends with Mina. They are even more stunned to hear that they made a childhood promise, so Kafka tries to sneak away. The guys stop him though and demand to hear the rest of his story. After the girls' bath, Kikaru wonders if something happened to the guys, as they don't look too good. It turns out that they were so caught up in conversation that they stayed in the bath too long. They were talking about Mina, so Kikaru just calls them stupid boys. The class would then go on to do even more training exercises. There were a lot of times of tension, but it's pretty clear that they were forming a bond together. They were doing practically everything together and growing stronger as a team. Kafka would one day fall behind during a run, but his buddy Ikikawa was there to help him keep going. One night Kafka refuses to sleep, as he knows that he must work twice as hard as everyone else. Hoshina surprises him and points out that sleep is pretty important too. Kafka refuses to let himself get tired, and Hoshina wonders if he's doing it all for Mina. Kafka can't believe that he knows about that, so Hoshina tells him that he should assume that every word he says in the dorm is being recorded. Kafka declares that he made a promise to fight by her side, but Hoshina points out that that could be interpreted as Kafka trying to steal his spot as Mina's vice captain. Kafka hesitates for a moment, but confidently declares that that is what he intends to do, and he will do his best to make it happen. Hoshina seems annoyed, but he allows Kafka to have 2 more hours for study. Before he leaves though, Hoshina declares that he will not let Kafka have his spot next to Mina. Kafka thanks him anyway, but Hoshina warns him not to get too close to the other officers. This is because anything could happen at any time. Just then an alarm sounds and everyone wakes up. This is exactly what Hoshina was warning him about, and he tells Kafka to get ready for his first mission. Konami gives Mina a status update, informing her that the area is being evacuated. It's a hectic scene with crowds of people waiting to board buses. The defense force is collaborating with another group to set up a command post nearby. The Hanzo, which emerged from underground, has grown even larger. Following the Hanzo's appearance, numerous Yaoju have also surfaced. Mina declares she will handle the Hanzo herself and chooses a sniping spot. Wishing everyone luck, she heads out. Hoshina announces that it's time to hunt some Kaiju, while Ikikawa grapples with the reality of their first mission. Hikaru looks at Kafka in disbelief, knowing he is Kaiju number 8. She sternly hopes he won't disappoint her, but he almost does as he looks like he's about to throw up. Meanwhile, the gigantic Hanzo and the evacuation shelter present a terrifying sight. Kafka and the rest of the Hoshina platoon arrive at the neutralization area, where Kafka gets his first look at the massive monster. Hoshina explains that Mina's unit will handle the Hanju, but the real problem is the swarm of Yaoju it's creating. Their job is to ensure none of the Yaoju escape from the neutralization area. As new recruits, they're stationed at the rear of the fight, making them the last line of defense. With everyone focused on the mission, no one has questions. Hoshina prepares to start, reminding them that training scores don't save lives. It's time to prove themselves on the real battlefield. The team shows their camaraderie, getting hyped up, and Hoshina encourages them to have fun out there. With civilian evacuation complete, Mina is 8 minutes away from her position. Kafka communicates with Ikikawa, declaring that he must prove he can handle the job. He recalls Hoshina's warning that he wouldn't last 3 months at his current pace, fearing this might be his last chance to prove himself. Despite his nerves, Kafka feels a strange excitement. Ikikawa reflects on how this is the job Kafka always wanted. They promise to make their first mission a success, and then receive word that the first Yaoju have arrived in their area. Ready for action, they all heroically jump off the building's roof. Kafka confidently declares that this mission will be a success, but he's the only one who slowly climbs down the side of the building. Meanwhile, Mina arrives at her sniper point. Another group is tasked with luring the Hanju to a different area, so they open fire on it. After several attacks, the giant monster begins to move, and Hoshina eagerly waits to see everyone prove themselves. As the fight begins, Kafka is surprised by how calm he feels, unlike during the exam. He now feels like his suit is actually helping him, and he confidently unleashes his combat power. Unfortunately, he gets wrecked by a Yaoju. His combat power is still just 1%, so Kikaru tells him he's too far up front and should be at the rear. Some veterans are annoyed about fighting alongside rookies, wishing they would just hide somewhere. They decide to be cautious and let the front lines figure out the Yaoju's weak spots. However, they are shocked when Kikaru starts taking out the monsters. She refuses to sit around and wait, attacking anything that looks like it might be a weak spot. Kikaru takes out a bunch of Yaojas, shocking the veterans with her impressive power, which is not usually seen in Rookie. Kafka praises her, making Kikaru blush, but she gets annoyed when her suit detects her increased heart rate. Nearby, the rest of the group works together to take down a Yaoju. Iharu is surprised when he sees Ikikawa take down a Yaoju by himself. Ikikawa explains that he switched out the burst rounds in his rifle for freeze rounds to slow the Yaoju down while he fights, which suits his style better. Ikikawa is confident that with practice, he will become even better at hunting kaiju. However, Ikikawa knows this isn't enough. He needs to keep getting stronger so Kafka won't ever have to transform again. The other top members of the group also show their skills by eliminating several Yaoju. The other platoons are amazed by the strength of the new recruits, and even the platoon leaders are surprised by their prowess. Kaguragi and Izumo compete to see who can eliminate more kaiju, while one of the platoon leaders, drooling with excitement, activates Cougar mode. Hoshina notes that the average combat power of the new recruits is higher than in most years, with a few standouts at the top motivating others to improve. Reports of Yaoju being eliminated keep coming in, and Kafka is surprised to hear that even Ikikawa and Iharu are advancing. Feeling discouraged, Kafka worries he's holding everyone back despite their hard work. He wonders if there's anything he can do to help. Then, he remembers that the veterans wanted to wait until they identified the Yaoju's weak points. Kafka examines a Yaoju corpse and decides to fight in his own way. Others are shocked to see him messing with the corpse, but Kafka, knee-deep in it, realizes that even at just 1% power, his suit makes it easy to dismantle a kaiju's body. He thinks the suit's usefulness could benefit the cleaning industry. Kafka recognizes the structure of the kaiju, but notices the core isn't in its usual place for a fungal-type monster. After searching, he finds the core and informs Hoshina that it's at the base of the neck. He also provides tips on the best way to attack it for those with weaker attack power. Kafka discovers that these Yaoju have reproductive organs, white, bumpy things on their rear. If they don't destroy these, the corpses might spawn new kaiju. Hoshina is amazed by Kafka's findings and tells Konami to spread the news. He commends Kafka once again, and Kafka is stunned that he can actually help the defense force. Kafka rushes off to neutralize the bodies of the defeated kaiju, vowing to do whatever it takes to stand by Mina's side. Suddenly, a large explosion occurs, signaling the start of the main attack on the Hanju. The Hanju has been lured to the designated area, and other platoons use suppressing fire to keep it in place. Mina readies her giant weapon and prepares to fire it. With everyone at a safe distance, she gets the all clear. Thinking about her competition with Kafka to become the cooler officer, Mina prepares to show him her progress. The immense power she unleashes destroys the ground beneath her feet, and her suit announces that Mina's unleashed combat power is an incredible 96%. Hoshina watches Mina, hoping Kafka is paying attention too. Mina fires her weapon, unleashing an insanely powerful attack that absolutely destroys the gigantic Hanju. Hoshina wants Kafka to see the power of the person he aspires to stand beside. The Hanju's core is now exposed, so Mina loads another round into her weapon. She fires again, obliterating even more of the Hanju, and Konami announces that its vitals have disappeared. The creature collapses, and Konami is a bit surprised when Mina loads a third round. Mina fires once more, and Konami confirms that the Hanju has completely stopped moving. Everyone is amazed but shocked when Mina loads a fourth round into her weapon. Konami points out that the Hanju is already down, but Mina demands the order to fire again. Konami gives the order, and Mina shoots at the monster once more. Kafka watches in total admiration, while Hoshina arrives and asks Kafka if he's ready to give up on his goal. Standing by Mina's side means matching her incredible strength. Hoshina admits that even he can't match Mina's combat power with long-range weapons, making her the one to take down the big targets. However, he excels when it comes to small and mid-sized kaiju. Just then, a kaiju appears behind Hoshina, and Kafka worries, but it proves to be an opportunity for Hoshina to demonstrate his skill. With a swift move, Hoshina slices the Yaoju to pieces and confidently states that he's better than Mina with monsters of this size. Kafka can't even see his attack. Hoshina explains that his family has been a clan of kaiju hunters for generations, and that captains and vice captains are the force's most powerful members, given special equipment tailored to their fighting styles. Mina informs Hoshina that the Hanju is down, and Hoshina tells Kafka that the real show is about to start. Kafka is confused since the Hanju is already defeated, but Hoshina reminds him that the real problem is the countless Yaoju still inside its corpse. An unbelievable number of Yaoju begin swarming out, so Hoshina tells everyone that once they finish off these smaller monsters, they can go home. The recruits think he's being too casual, so the veterans taunt them for giving up already. Determined to show the new recruits that there's more to fighting than just combat power, they head out to battle. The cougar named Nakanashima suggests that Kaguragi and Nizumo let the veterans handle everything, but they prefer to fight. Konami observes the new recruits and notices they are getting tired. Their unleashed combat power and endurance are dropping. Hoshina acknowledges it's a tough mission, but believes pushing through will elevate them to the next level. Most officers end their careers with combat power between 20 and 30%. However, a select few surpass that barrier to become captains. Currently, Kikuro is the only new recruit at that level, but Hoshina thinks Ikikawa might also have the potential. Ikikawa eliminates another kaiju, leaving Ihiro frustrated. Despite years of training at a renowned technical college, he can't understand why he can't keep up with Ikikawa. Then, they receive news of more Yaoju nearby and head to the front lines. Ikikawa is surprised to see the jacket of the monster sweeping company, and wonders why a cleaner is there. They try to tell the cleaner that their services won't be needed for a while, but are ignored. The cleaner is disappointed that the reproductive organs he implanted in the Yaoju have been destroyed. He speculates that someone in the force knows a lot about kaiju. The recruits are stunned when the cleaner, with a distorted face, turns to them and asks if they know anything about what happened. Meanwhile, 3 members of the sweeper team are observing from a distance. Using binoculars, they try to spot their old mates, Kafka and Aikawa, but can't find them in the destruction zone. They worry about Kafka and Aikawa since this is their first mission. One of the sweepers mentions their new recruit is missing, but the others dismiss it, assuming he must be locked in the bathroom, as he often does. We then see the villain Kaiju, and he is still staring at the corpse like a creep. Furuhashi, unaware that the villain is also a kaiju, steps up and tells him to run away since this place is very dangerous at the moment. Instead of responding to Furuhashi, the man points his finger at him, which suddenly mutates, making Aikawa instantly realize the guy is dangerous. He instinctively tells Furuhashi to duck. Before Furuhashi can react, the man shoots him. Fortunately, the shot misses his heart, but Furuhashi starts bleeding heavily from the attack. The kaiju man blames his new form for the poor shot, indicating he hasn't fully adapted to his human body yet. Furuhashi screams in pain, realizing the bleeding isn't stopping, despite the Defense Corps suit's power. Aikawa tries to calm him down, urging him to use the suit's power to stop the bleeding. While Furuhashi struggles to regain his composure, Aikawa focuses on the kaiju man, realizing he must be similar to Kafka. When the kaiju man returns to his true form, Aikawa understands that this humanoid isn't a human turning into a kaiju but a kaiju disguised as a human. Aikawa informs Furuhashi about their dangerous opponent, revealing that this kaiju was responsible for taking down their best recruit, Shinomiya. The kaiju man, who was about to leave, decides to stay and take one of them as a specimen for experiments, recognizing their value as Defense Force officers. Aikawa realizes he's in deep trouble and quickly contacts his platoon leader, Ikaruga, to report the mysterious humanoid kaiju. Unfortunately, the message doesn't get through because the kaiju man has tampered with his communicator. The kaiju man boasts that he's disrupted the entire area's communications, making it undetectable from the outside world. This trick helps him stay hidden among humans and makes it easier to hunt them. The kaiju man then points his finger at Aikawa, intending to knock him down. Aikawa skillfully dodges the attacks at first, but eventually, he's overwhelmed and falls to his knees, struggling to move. He remembers Shinomiya's warning that the kaiju man can shoot from his fingers using some kind of magic. By watching the kaiju man's hand movements, Aikawa manages to dodge the attacks and gains enough confidence to fight back, shooting ice bullets at him. As he continues shooting, Aikawa tells Furuhashi to run and inform the others about the humanoid kaiju. Furuhashi, though reluctant to leave his comrade behind, realizes he's only hindering Aikawa. He decides to run away to get help. Leaving Aikawa to face the kaiju alone, Furuhashi runs, grappling with guilt and frustration. Aikawa knows he can't defeat this kaiju, especially since even Shinomiya, their best fighter, couldn't scratch him. But as a Defense Corps member, Aikawa is determined to buy Furuhashi enough time to escape, even if it costs him his life. Furuhashi, fleeing, questions why Aikawa would sacrifice himself and how he believes he can fight such a powerful kaiju. He starts to despise his own helplessness, remembering how he once aimed to be among the top recruits. Since joining the Defense Corps, his only goal has been to become strong enough to stand beside Captain Mina Hashiro. Yet, he hasn't progressed as much as Aikawa, who wasn't expected to surpass him or the other top officers. Back in the battle, Aikawa continues shooting at the kaiju man, who notices that Aikawa doesn't seem as terrified as he should be. Suspecting that Aikawa knows something about him, the kaiju man decides to try a new attack, using all 4 of his arms simultaneously. Aikawa realizes he can't dodge this one, bracing for the worst. But just then, Furuhashi, the knucklehead he told to run, returns. He leaps in, taking the hit meant for Aikawa and saving him from being destroyed. Furuhashi realizes that he has always been the weak one needing rescue, today by Aikawa, and in the past by Mina Hashiro. As someone who identifies as a Sigma male, he refuses to be saved anymore. He tells Aikawa that he wants to be the main character of this story, not just a side character. Meanwhile, the kaiju man watches the drama between the two, amused by their delusion of being the main characters. Aikawa keeps urging Furuhashi to escape, but the kaiju man claims that no one can leave his confined space without his permission. With no other options, the 2 determined Defense Corps fighters rise to fight for their lives and attack the kaiju man together. Furuhashi lands a shot using his lightning bullets, annoying the kaiju man, who decides to eliminate him first. However, Furuhashi has learned to dodge his attacks. Aikawa, meanwhile, taps into the power of anime and friendship. With sheer willpower, he unleashes the maximum power from his weapon, utilizing all the suit's abilities, and attacks the kaiju man. But the kaiju man summons a wall of corpses in an instant, protecting himself from the shot. In the end, Aikawa is defeated and rendered unconscious by the kaiju man. Elsewhere, Vice Captain Hashino learns from Aikawa's platoon leader, Ikaruga, that both Aikawa and Furuhashi have gone missing. Kafka and Shinomiya also receive this news, realizing that something has gone terribly wrong. Assuming the worst-case scenario, they predict that the kaiju man has made his appearance. Despite his severe injuries, Aikawa doesn't give up and tries to get back on his feet. Seeing this, the kaiju man decides to end things quickly. He neutralizes Furuhashi before he can interfere again and starts shooting Aikawa from every angle. After taking down Aikawa, the kaiju man shifts his focus to Furuhashi, who has already given up. But before he can shoot, the true main character arrives, Kafka. He steps in just in time and delivers a powerful punch to the kaiju man, sending his head flying from his body. However, the kaiju man doesn't die. He's only sent flying into the distance. Kafka, meanwhile, lifts the injured Aikawa onto his shoulders and brings him back to safety, placing him in front of Furuhashi. Furuhashi is shocked to see another humanoid kaiju. The kaiju man returns, having recognized Kafka as kaiju number 8. Kafka, who thought he'd finished off the kaiju man with one powerful punch, sets Aikawa down, telling him to hold on and promising to save him. He then approaches the kaiju man, who can't understand why another humanoid kaiju would oppose him. Realizing Kafka's immense strength, the kaiju man decides he wants to use Kafka's corpse for his experiments and attacks him with a mere stare. He then mutates into a giant mushroom tree, revealing that he wasn't taking Furuhashi and Aikawa seriously earlier, and was just toying with them. Kafka, now completely enraged, channels his inner destructive powers, transforming into a Godzilla-like mode. His body glows, granting him super speed and incredible strength. With this enhanced status, he closes the distance with the kaiju man in an instant and lands a punch before the kaiju man can create another shield, like he did against Aikawa. Kafka shatters the shield and continues to unleash rapid punches, pushing the kaiju man back. Realizing he can't defeat kaiju number 8, the kaiju man tries to retreat. However, Kafka doesn't let him escape and continues to punch directly into his core. Channeling all his strength into his fists, Kafka delivers a final, powerful blow, sending the kaiju man flying miles away into the distance. The kaiju man notices that his core has been exposed by Kafka's attack, but he's unable to move. As Kafka moves in to finish him off, Defense Corps officers arrive and point their guns at Kafka, unaware that he is human. The soldiers report to their superiors about the sighting of a humanoid kaiju, raising the question of whether Kafka can escape this situation. Meanwhile, Shinomiya, who has been dealing with other kaijus, recalls her earlier conversation with Kafka. He had told her his intention to search for Aikawa and Furuhashi, explaining that he could sense the kaiju man because they are the same type. This is why he took off immediately, without considering that he might be spotted by Defense Corps officers. Back in the present, Shinomiya hears about the sighting of a humanoid kaiju and realizes it must be Kafka. She rushes to the scene to prevent the mistaken officers from harming him. Meanwhile, the kaiju man regenerates his body, and escapes, with Kafka unable to move due to the officer's guns. With the kaiju man gone, Kafka also makes his escape, running to a narrow alley to safely transform back into his human form. Unbeknownst to him, Hoshina has followed him and informs his comrades that he has located Kaiju number 8. Before Kafka can explain the situation, Hoshina draws his purple katana and swiftly attacks him with the intent to kill. Vice Captain Hoshina stands with a violet aura surrounding him, staring at Kafka. Kafka has his fists up, ready to fight, but he knows he can't punch Hoshina because Hana would instantly die if he did. Suddenly, blood bursts from Kafka's chest. He looks up and sees Hoshina high in the air. Kafka realizes he can't survive against the vice captain if he holds back his power. Hoshina lands and propels himself off a street pole, launching himself at Kafka. Kafka quickly jumps away, dodging the crater Hoshina creates with his attack. Hoshina launches himself again at the fleeing Kafka, attacking with his knives. Kafka dodges, moving his head back and forth, narrowly avoiding decapitation. Hoshina's attacks are so fast that Kafka doesn't even have time to harden his body for protection. A few cuts and slashes get past Kafka's guard, and wounds start appearing all over his body. Kafka realizes that although Hoshina might not be stronger than other humanoid kaiju, his incredible speed more than makes up for it. Shinomiya moved fast during their training, but Hoshina is on a whole other level. Kafka jumps into a narrow alley, hoping to shake off Hoshina, but Hoshina simply leaps between the walls, pursuing him. A few seconds later, Hoshina attacks again, cutting off Kafka's hand. Not only that, his chest is sliced open, exposing his core. Kafka lands on the wall and quickly regenerates, growing back his hand and healing his chest. It's the first time Kafka uses his regeneration, and he notices it uses a lot of stamina. He continues to escape while avoiding any more dangerous hits. When Hoshina closes the gap again, Kafka meets Hoshina's blades with his fists, deflecting the strikes. Hoshina's appraisal of Kafka rises, guessing that his opponent must have at least level 8 fortitude, classifying him as a Daikeiju, one of the highest classifications possible. However, Hoshina senses something odd about their fight but stays focused. He jumps away and prepares his blades. Kafka tries to catch his breath while Hoshina's blade glows red with power. Hoshina then slashes at Kafka from a distance. This time, Hoshina's knives emit 2 powerful energy slashes, cutting through the air. Kafka could see the barely visible slashes coming straight toward him, and he quickly jumps to the side. The slashes cut through his knee, severing his leg, but it's not over yet. Hoshina is already in front of Kafka. Kafka realizes that the double slash earlier was just a decoy, and this is the real attack. Hoshina slices again, this time aiming directly at Kafka's chest where his core is. Kafka blocks, but the knife cuts deep into his body. Hoshina is confident of his success, but his eyes widen in surprise. His blade is stopped by a toothy mouth that suddenly forms in Kafka's chest. Hoshina tries to pull the knife back, but the teeth hold it firmly. Blood dribbles down Kafka's mouth, but his plan worked. He knew that Hoshina would target his core when he saw it earlier, and prepared a countermeasure. Electricity courses through his body as he readies a powerful punch. Hoshina realizes he might be in danger, but Kafka targets his punch at Hoshina's knife, forcing Hoshina to let go and breaking it off. Hoshina is blasted back by the shockwave of the attack and lands a few meters away. When he looks up, Kafka is already gone. Hoshina slaps his head in regret that his prey got away. He calls Captain Mina, who has just finished eliminating all the other small kaiju, and reports that Kaiju number 8 got away. On one of the battlefields, Shinomiya sits on a kaiju corpse, wondering if she can truly trust Kafka. Her doubts fade when she sees Kafka return alive in his human form. She smiles widely and begins to scold him, but she quickly catches him as he stumbles into her arms. Kafka apologizes for failing to kill the humanoid kaiju, but Shinomiya blushes and says she'll handle it herself. Kafka tries to leave to find the injured Aikawa, but Shinomiya stops him. She points out that the injured should be fine since the Corps are using kaiju technology to heal them. Instead, she starts scolding Kafka for getting into a battle with the vice captain. Meanwhile, Mina notices Hoshina looking deep in thought. When she asks him about Kaiju number 8, Hoshina says it's probably a Daikeiju. This would be the first one since the last Daikeiju in Fukuoka 5 years ago. Thankfully, Kaiju number 8 hasn't caused any casualties despite its high threat level. Hoshina keeps wondering why the kaiju attacked his weapon instead of him during their fight. He felt like he was fighting a human, not a monster. Mina advises him not to overthink it since their mission is still to eliminate all the kaiju. Then, a message from Ikaruga arrives, informing the 2 leaders that they identified the kaiju that attacked Aikawa and Furuhashi. It was the same one that appeared at their exam site. He also mentions they found the kaiju looking like a human. In another part of the city, the humanoid kaiju, now back in his human form, walks away from the battlefield. A car stops behind him, and the driver tells him to move. The human kaiju eats the driver and takes his identity, driving the car away. The Defense Corps announces over the radio that this latest humanoid kaiju is designated as Kaiju number 9. Meanwhile, Kaiju number 9 wonders how to kill Kaiju number 8. A few hours later, Aikawa wakes up in the hospital with Shinomiya and Kafka by his side. Aikawa thanks Kafka for saving them, but Kafka looks surprised. Eiharu, who is also in the room, asks Aikawa why he's thanking Kafka when it was Kaiju number 8 who saved them. Eiharu starts wondering aloud why Kaiju number 8 saved them and praises its strength, making Kafka blush. Eiharu asks why Kafka is blushing, prompting Shinomiya to hit Kafka from behind to make him stop. After being discharged from the hospital, a party is held to celebrate Furuhashi and Aikawa's recovery. All the Defense Corps rookies congratulate them, surprising Furuhashi and Aikawa, who didn't expect such special treatment from their typically frugal comrades. Kafka explains that the party is not only to celebrate their recovery, but also to mark their first win in their debut mission. The team had been waiting for Furuhashi and Aikawa to recover so they could all celebrate together. With everyone present, Kafka calls for the meal. A team of 9 members emerges from behind the curtains, revealing they had been waiting to surprise the group. The cooking team serves Kafka and the others with a special dish of Japanese 6 Wagyu beef, an expensive delicacy they didn't even know existed. The party was organized by Haruichi Izumo, one of the top rookies, which is why the cooking team is putting in extra effort to impress and satisfy everyone. Haruichi steps forward with a concerned look, recalling that he ordered the cheapest course and explaining that his entire family couldn't afford 6 Wagyu beef. However, the chef reassures him, promising to only charge the standard price. Joking aside, Shinomiya reveals that Haruichi is the heir to Izumo Technology, a major tech company in Japan, which is why he can afford such luxury. Kafka asks what Haruichi's company does, and Shinomiya explains that Izumo Technologies is the largest manufacturer of anti-kaiju arms in the country. They make the Defense Force suits. She adds that Haruichi has far more money than her family. Knowing this, she conspired to waste some of his money for their celebration, effectively manipulating him into treating them, making it technically her arrangement. Hashina then joins the group and calls for a toast to appreciate their hard work on their debut mission, encouraging them to relax and have fun. Kafka immediately downs an entire glass of beer, while the girls start their own eating session. While different groups chat among themselves, Aikawa, sitting next to Hashina, notices how happy everyone is. He thanks Hashina for letting the recruits have the party. But strangely, Hashina gives a wicked grin and warns Aikawa that something exciting is about to happen. Confused, Aikawa asks what Hashina means, but before he can get an answer, Shinomiya interrupts. She starts arguing with Furuhashi, accusing him of being selfish and showing off without having real skills. She tells him not to take everything so personally. Furuhashi gets angry, saying Shinomiya is being hypocritical because she also takes things personally. He reminds her of the time when she almost sacrificed herself for her family's honor. Meanwhile, Kaguragi, who usually stays out of the spotlight, argues with Izumo. Aikawa finds their argument pointless. Then, Kafka, completely drunk, joins in and asks Izumo for advice on releasing more power. He thinks his suit might be faulty, but Kaguragi bluntly tells him he's just the weakest one there. As arguments break out among everyone else, Aikawa realizes they're discussing their first mission and criticizing each other's mistakes, which is helpful for identifying areas to improve. Kafka challenges Kaguragi to an arm wrestling match to prove their strength, but Kaguragi wins easily. Similar fights break out among the others, showing the chaos Hashina mentioned earlier. Hashina laughs, explaining that it's a yearly tradition for rookies to fight at their celebration party. Meanwhile, Haruichi talks with Chef Tajima, thanking him for their collaboration after a long time. Dojima asks Haruichi about his father, but Haruichi doesn't have a good answer because he hasn't spoken to his father in a long time. There's a reason for this, but Haruichi hasn't shared it yet. Kaguragi overhears, but doesn't interfere, quietly heading to the restroom. Back at the party, Hashina calms everyone down and announces Kafka's promotion to officer despite his weakness because he saved many lives with his insight about kaiju eggs during their mission. Kafka is officially welcomed to the team and cheered for still having what it takes despite his age. The next day, Kafka receives his official officer suit from Captain Mina Ashiro, who doesn't hold back in discouraging him. She tells him his talentless body won't let him fight by her side, even if he tried his whole life. Kafka doesn't take it negatively, and is just glad she remembers he wants to fight with her. He casually tells Mina to wait for him, which earns him a punishment for not showing proper respect. Before leaving, Mina tells Kafka not to let down Hashina, revealing that Hashina saw potential in him and was the only one who recommended him to be a full officer in the Defense Corps. Kafka is studying hard one night when he notices someone in the training room. Curious, he goes inside and finds Hashina practicing alone, reenacting his earlier fight with Kaiju number 8. Hashina stops when he sees Kafka and explains that he's devising a strategy to defeat Kaiju number 8. This worries Kafka, who doesn't want to get hurt by Hashina. Still, he respects Hashina and salutes him properly. He knows Hashina is training late to protect the country and their comrades from the new humanoid Kaijus. Meanwhile, in the sky, a mysterious crimson Kaiju flies with its army of Kaiju dragons, likely heading to cause trouble for the Defense Corps. Hashino ponders how Kaiju number 8 exhibits human-like movements. He then considers Kaiju number 9, which can speak and disguise itself as a human. This unsettling trend among the Kaiju deeply concerns him. Meanwhile, Kafka reflects on Hashino's words and resolves not to disappoint him. As Kafka heads to bed, he is startled by a rain of fire descending from the sky. An overwhelming barrage of fireballs bombards the base, rousing Kafka's teammates to chaos and destruction. Konami informs Hashino that the base is overrun by dozens of Kaiju. These Kaiju are airborne, each with a fortitude rating exceeding 6. The most terrifying aspect is that they are all Hanju. On the ground, one of these monstrous beings wreaks havoc, unleashing a devastating attack. With Mina away, Hashino takes charge, issuing orders to prepare for combat. He instructs everyone to lure as many Kaiju as possible into the training area and to ensure none escape the base. Noticing the absence of damage reports from outside the base, Hashino speculates that the Kaiju's target might be the base itself. Kafka is horrified by the sight of the base engulfed in flames, recognizing the wyvern-type Kaiju as a severe threat. However, he pauses, realizing that their presence indicates something is amiss. Elsewhere, Hashina directs all rifle users to head to the center of the base, where they will lure and shoot the Kaiju. Kafka then explains to Hashina that typically, only about a dozen or so wyvern-type Kaiju are seen each year, and they always appear alone. Hashina deduces that their arrival as a group this time signifies that something has the power to make them swallow their pride and the intelligence to act with a goal in mind. He predicts that they must have a powerful leader. Just then, this leader appears before Hashina. It declares that its target has been spotted, prompting Hashina to tell Kafka that he's hanging up now. The leader demands to know if Hashina is the strongest human at the base, and Hashina is shocked to hear it talk. With Mina absent, Hashina claims that he is the strongest, and the leader decides to make him its prey. At that moment, Konami reveals that this leader is a Daikeiju class with a fortitude of 8.3. Hashina instructs his second-in-command to handle the fight with the other Kaiju so he can focus on the Daikeiju, but he must quickly dodge an attack from it. The monster is impressed and says that Hashina passes, then unleashes another powerful attack. Hashina evades once again, which pleases the Daikeiju even more. It determines that it's time to begin the annihilation, and its scream causes all the other Kaiju to scream as well. Hashina realizes they're reacting to its battle cry, confirming that their target is the base. As Hashina dodges another attack, he notes that the monster's punches hit like meteor strikes. He knows that if he gets hit, he's a goner, so he continues to dodge its relentless attacks. Hashina manages to land an attack, but the beast's skin is even tougher than Kaiju number 8's. Elsewhere, the others struggle to fight the Kaiju. Their attacks are ineffective, and they're shocked when Kafka tells them to stop attacking from the front. He explains that they need to target the Kaiju's backs. The wyvern types have thicker skin on the front to protect them in flight, but their back skin is thinner to keep their weight down, and the core is near the back. Impressed by Kafka's knowledge, the team changes their formation to aim for the Kaiju's backs. Izumo and Kaguragi team up against one of these beasts, with Kaguragi acting as a decoy. Izumo releases his full combat power to fire an attack but must quickly dodge when another Kaiju appears to attack him. The Kaiju are working together and watching each other's backs, which is terrifying. No one knows what to do, and they're shocked when Kikaru announces there's another way. Suddenly, Kikaru appears, running at blazing speed, and attacks a Kaiju. She reveals a new weapon and declares that her plan is to use her unstoppable power to smash through their front armor. A flashback shows Kikaru in the base's underground weapon storage, shocked to learn that a custom weapon was made especially for her. Normally, only captains receive such weapons, but they made an exception for Kikaru. With Kaiju levels increasing, and Kikaru being the third most powerful officer on base, they decided to treat her as part of their main force. Mina declares that Kikaru is now officially the third strongest weapon, after the captain and vice captain, so it's her job to annihilate the Kaiju. Back in the present, Kikaru acknowledges that her new weapon packs a powerful punch, but laments that such an ugly weapon doesn't really suit her. Everyone is shocked by the damage she inflicts, and she declares that this Kaiju's life will now end. Kikaru dodges its attack and reveals that her weapon was made from the uni-organ of a Hondu that was neutralized 2 years ago. Hashino had told her that pulling the trigger would turn on the power, releasing shock waves. Hikaru uses this to accelerate forward and employs her first technique to crush the kaiju. Another kaiju appears out of nowhere, so she uses another shockwave, this time to deal massive damage. The onlookers are amazed, thinking that the weapon suits her perfectly. Suddenly, another kaiju appears in the sky, but Kikaru is surprised when it is hit by freeze rounds. It was Ikikawa, impressing Kikaru with his ability to fight against such strong kaiju. Ikikawa fires more rounds at the kaiju, and Kikaru finishes it off. She allows Ikikawa the honor of helping her, but only if he can keep up. Ikikawa confidently replies that he can. Izumo and Kaguragi refuse to be outdone by Kikaru and Ikikawa. They decide to hit the enemy from behind while Kikaru keeps it distracted. Hashina is pleased to hear that Kikaru is doing a great job, but he faces a real problem with the leader. The insane speed and power of the leader pushes Hashina back, but what's most terrifying is that Hashina can tell the Dai Kaiju is enjoying the fight, an emotion Kaiju are not supposed to have. Hashina makes his way through Gate 3, and becomes upset when the beast destroys it. Suddenly, he's shocked when the beast disappears. This terrifying monster explains that most kaiju can't fight like Hashina does, so it can't wait to eat him and become even stronger. The leader sends Hashina flying, but acknowledges Hashina's strength as he manages to slice its arm off. Hashina then apologizes to Konami, explaining that he has decided to skip procedure. Now that they're on the training grounds, he doesn't have to worry about hurting the officers, so he can go all out. Hashino unleashes his 92% combat power, and declares that it's time to neutralize this Dai Kaiju. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a girl finds herself in dire trouble. Kafka is nearby, but he won't make it in time, so he transforms just his legs to rescue her. She is shocked to have been saved by Kafka and assumes he must have learned to use his suit. He just goes along with it, but the beast prepares to attack them again. Fortunately, Kikaru and Ikikawa arrive in time to save them. Kikaru tells Kafka to get the injured to safety. Ikikawa then speaks directly to Kafka, urging him not to take any unnecessary risks. He reminds Kafka that he is now a full officer and needs to trust in his fellow officers. Kafka understands and is amazed as he watches them fight. They work together seamlessly, and Kafka can only wonder when they developed such incredible teamwork. Just then, Konami announces that other units have arrived to help. Kafka couldn't be happier, realizing that the senior officers who were off duty have finally shown up. The platoon starts forming a plan to work together, and things are starting to seem more hopeful. They're managing to push back the kaiju even without Mina being there. Kafka goes to help the wounded, reflecting on how amazing his 3rd Division is. Nearby, Hashina tells the leader that they picked a fight with the wrong people, and he is confident that they will win. The two begin fighting again, and the Daikeiju realizes something. Hashina has been strategically slicing through the tiny gaps in the Daikeiju's exoskeleton. However, the leader, now disappointed, realizes that this tactic makes the fight less enjoyable for him. Knowing what Hashina is aiming for, he starts closing off the openings. To his shock, Hashina still manages to slice him to pieces. The leader realizes that Hashina aiming for his gaps was just a diversion. Despite being torn apart, the Daikeiju only gets more excited. This is the kind of fight he enjoys, and he begins to regenerate rapidly. Relishing the challenge, the Daikeiju is taken aback again when Hashina slices him up enough to expose his core. Hashina employs another of his sword techniques, prompting everyone to celebrate, thinking the battle is over. However, Konami notices something strange, and Hashina quickly shouts that it's not over yet. Nearby, Kafka feels an intense pain and wonders why his detection ability is going off even though he hasn't transformed. He fears the worst and worries about Hashina. Konami is equally terrified as she and Hashina watch the Daikeiju begin to transform into something much bigger. Hashina realizes that the position of its core must have changed, preventing him from fully destroying it. The Daikeiju releases ultra-high temperature steam, and Hashina is thankful they are within the training grounds. Konami then announces that the Daikeiju's fortitude is rising, struggling to believe the numbers she's seeing. The beast finishes its transformation, and she announces that its fortitude is now 9. Hashina is horrified by the Daikeiju's new form, and the beast releases a deafening roar. Konami fears that Hashina won't be able to handle the behemoth alone, as the monstrous creature towers over him. Kafka continues to endure immense pain, sensing that Hashina is in trouble. The giant attacks Hashina, who surprisingly manages to slice the beast. He lands several more cuts, causing the monster to scream, but it declares that Hashina's speed won't save him. Hashina nearly manages to stab its eye, and Konami is amazed that he's still fighting the beast after its transformation. Despite Hashina's incredible speed, his blades aren't cutting all the way through, highlighting why he despises giant kaiju. Determined, Hashina decides to use his speed to reach the monster's core on its back. Suddenly, he stops and coughs up blood. Isu alerts him that he's overheating and recommends canceling his maximum release immediately. Konami points out that it's been 10 minutes since he activated his maximum release and pleads for him to shut it down, but Hashina is too busy dodging attacks. Hashina realizes he has about a minute left. He's shocked to find that the flying kaiju are self-destructing to attack him, turning into terrifying living missiles. However, he uses the resulting smoke screen to hide from the giant, scaling a building to get behind it. Unfortunately, the creature has eyes on its back and sends Hashina flying through several buildings. Everyone fears for his life as Hashina's suit reaches its limit, canceling his maximum release. It recommends seeking medical attention immediately, and Konami calls out to him. A flashback reveals someone telling Hashina that the era of blades has passed. If it were 100 years ago, Hashina's talents with blades would have made him a genius. Other weapons are now considered superior, and Hashina was advised to give up on joining the defense force. Back in the present, Konami continues to cry out to Hashina, who reassures her not to worry. The giant kaiju strikes with immense force, but Hashina's shield is set to maximum, absorbing the blow. However, without his maximum release, Hashina feels uncertain about his next move. Concerned for everyone else's safety, he is relieved to hear that they are beginning to turn the tide against the Yaoju. Encouraged by this, Hashina resolves to fight to the very end. Konami begs him to stop, but it's too late. Hashina dodges an attack and uses another technique to cut the beast, only to see it regenerate instantly. He gets hit and flashes back to the past. He recalls being told that his unleashed combat power with guns was insufficient for the times, even after making it into the defense force. The rise of giant kaiju made many believe he couldn't stand against them with just his blades. Hashina had heard similar criticisms his entire life, but Mina was the only one who ever said something different. He had been prepared for her to tell him to give up, but was shocked when she asked him to join her force instead. Despite their differences, he excels at fighting smaller kaiju. While she specializes in battling giant ones, Mina left him in charge of the base. Now, he declares that he will protect it at all costs. Determined, Hashina dodges another attack and uses his technique to cut the beast once more, but the regeneration seems unstoppable. With his shield still at maximum, he braces himself for the next strike, knowing that he must find a way to overcome the beast's regenerative abilities if he is to protect everyone and fulfill Mina's trust in him. Hashina relentlessly attacks, executing technique after technique, inflicting significant damage on the giant kaiju. He eventually reaches his sixth technique, but just as he does, the beast grabs him, leaving everyone horrified. Kafka arrives, terrified to see Hashina's life slipping away. Realizing he has no other choice, Kafka decides to transform, despite Ikikawa's warnings that doing so will leave no escape for him. Ikikawa tries to stop Kafka, but Kafka is determined to save his comrades, valuing their lives above all else. As Kafka begins to transform, he suddenly halts, as everyone is stunned to hear Mina's voice. Hashina, still held by the giant, tells the beast that it has won this fight, and then the giant is struck by a powerful attack. Hashina explains that as vice captain, his job is to set up their target for Mina. Mina announces that she will bypass procedure and prepares to obliterate the giant with her enormous weapon. Her shot takes a large chunk out of the beast, but she must dodge an attack from one of the flying kaijus. As the giant rapidly regenerates, Hashina urgently informs Mina that the kaiju's core is on its back. Kafka continues to advance, and Hashina realizes that defeating the beast isn't going to be easy, even for Mina. He unleashes his combat power at 63%, using attacks to limit the monster's mobility, aiming to make it an easier target for Mina. Konami is shocked that he can still fight, as his suit is already past its limit. Hashina's attacks are nullified by the monster's regeneration, making him realize that his power output isn't enough. He is at a loss for what to do until Kikaru suddenly appears. She swings her massive axe, but finds she isn't strong enough to even scratch the monster. Despite this, Hashina encourages her to keep going. Hashina devises a plan. He will cut open the monster's shell, and Kikaru will chop into the wounds. They execute the plan, and Kikaru is stunned when it works. Although Kikaru begins to overheat, her efforts successfully make the monster less mobile. This allows Mina to land another attack, exposing the monster's core. With only one bullet left, Mina receives support from everyone who arrives to protect her. Hashina instructs the others to attack the monster non-stop so it can't regenerate. The battle intensifies, and Hashina pushes himself to the limit, continuously striking the beast. His body can barely keep up, but he is determined to carve a path. Hashina refuses to give up, knowing this is the only way to leave his mark. Just as the monster is about to devour him, Mina thanks him for a job well done. She declares that she was right to make Hoshina her vice captain. Mina's unleashed combat power surges to 96% as she prepares to fire her most powerful attack. Hoshina tells the giant kaiju that it picked the wrong people to mess with, just as Mina's attack blows the monster to pieces. Konami announces that the Hanju is down, and everyone celebrates. Hoshina helps Kikaru up, and Kafka admires Captain Mina, getting emotional as he declares that this is the defense force he dreamed of joining since he was a kid. Kafka marvels at the captains, hoping to stand by their side one day. Ikikawa tells him his face is a mess, but Kafka says he's just a bit emotional. Ikikawa points out that they are just getting started themselves, and the two agree to do their best. Hoshina wants to handle the remaining Yaoji, but Mina insists he needs to rest. Mina herself is told she needs to rest too, as she only has 1% left in her suit before it overheats. Suddenly, Mina's tiger senses something, and everyone is shocked to see something terrifying in the sky. It quickly becomes clear that this is why the giant did its battle cry, and Konami announces that the thing's power level is rising. The monsters are diving into the thing, creating a giant Yaoju bomb with damage equivalent to a nuclear bomb. Hoshina tells the others not to shoot at it. Mina orders everyone to evacuate, but Hoshina realizes there's no time. The giant calls out to Hoshina, pointing out that their fight will end in a draw. At that moment, someone rushes toward the bomb. Ikikawa begs Kafka not to do what he's planning. Hoshina tries to stop him, explaining there's nothing Kafka can do. However, Hoshina stops, shocked by how fast Kafka is moving. Kafka is moving at an insane speed, far beyond what 1% unleashed combat power should allow. Everyone is in absolute disbelief when Kafka transforms right in front of them. Konami announces that they are detecting a gigantic signal with a fortitude of 9.8, identifying this creature as Kaiju number 8. Hoshina's mouth nearly hits the floor from shock, realizing that something was always off about Kafka. He had been suspicious of Kafka, but liked him too much to act on those suspicions. The transformed Kafka apologizes to Hoshina for lying, to Kikaru for all the effort she put into keeping his secret, and to Ikikawa for not being able to keep his promise. Kafka then thinks about Mina as he prepares to do something reckless. Despite Ikikawa's attempts to stop him, Kafka has made up his mind. He reflects on how everyone has been risking their lives and decides he can't be the only one putting his safety first. Launching himself into the sky, Kafka declares that he is part of the defense force too, and now it's his turn to protect everyone else. With a powerful punch, he hits the giant bomb, sending it high into the sky before crashing down to Earth. Mina orders everyone to use their maximum shields as the bomb causes a massive explosion in the sky. Despite being miles above, the explosion and shockwaves still cause significant damage on the ground. Kafka stands strong during the explosion, protecting his comrades. As the dust settles, he realizes the gravity of what he's done. His arms and legs are barely holding together, and he jokes about being too old for such stunts. Just then, Mina calls out to Kafka, but she corrects herself and calls him Kaiju number 8. Raising her gun, she tells Kaiju number 8 that she is taking him into custody. News about Kaiju number 8 being a member of the defense forces spreads rapidly among the top brass, prompting an urgent high-level meeting. Kaji, the deputy director of the defense forces, stresses the seriousness of the situation and insists that it must be addressed immediately. Juzo, the chief of the Eastern Command, suggests keeping this information from the media for now. He also mentions hearing rumors about some countries experimenting with transplanting kaiju tissues into human bodies. Kaji argues that the best course of action would be to eliminate the kaiju and use its remains as a weapon. However, the lead scientist proposes that they should first consider utilizing the kaiju as a living weapon. Isal, the fierce director general of the defense forces and Kiko's father, decides that they will bring the kaiju to headquarters before making any final decisions. Meanwhile, Kafka is securely restrained at his base, with a team of scientists led by Kaji closely monitoring him. Kafka can't tell how long he has been restrained, and he wonders what his fate will be. Recalling a past conversation with Kiko, he knows he will likely be disposed of, with his body parts used to create special weapons. He sighs, thinking it's unfortunate that this happened just as he was getting closer to being by Mina's side. As he contemplates this, Mina, Hoshina, and several other officers arrive to transport him to headquarters. Kafka tries to speak to Mina, but she completely ignores him, and even Hoshina instructs him to remain silent. Freed from his restraints, Kafka is quietly escorted out. Outside the building, all the base officers, including his friends, stand ready and armed, watching him depart. Kafka walks past Ikai, unable to meet his gaze. He thinks about how much Ikai has done for him and assumes he must be furious about Kafka blowing his cover. Feeling hopeless, Kafka climbs into the secure trailer. Unexpectedly, Ikai steps forward and declares that he trusts Kafka will return safely. Kafka is left speechless by Ikai's gesture as the trailer doors close in front of him. While still processing this, Mina informs him that there are no cameras inside the container. She begins to talk about how shocked she was when he transformed into a kaiju, but she also felt it was typical of him to rush ahead and help others without considering the consequences. Mina tells Kafka that she is compiling testimony and footage to support his case. She believes that if they can prove he is human at heart, he can be saved. She plans to list all the positive actions he has taken as an officer of the defense force. Kafka can only silently listen to all this, and then Mina finally faces him, telling him that no one in their unit considers him an enemy. She instructs him to sit in the special chair and begins reading out the rules. Kafka interrupts her, with tears in his eyes, asking if he can still try to stand by her side. Mina falls silent for a moment, then tells him she will always be waiting for him, causing Kafka to burst into tears. The convoy takes off, and Hoshina commands everyone to salute it. Kaji is shocked and asks him what he is doing. Hoshina replies that he is saluting his captain. Kaji reluctantly accepts this answer, remarking that they can't have anyone saluting a kaiju. Soon, Kafka is taken to the maritime base of the defense force, where he is put in a tightly guarded room underwater. Several days later, all the defense force members are sitting in the training area, which is being cleared and repaired after the last battle. They are all silent and glum, so Furu decides to break the ice. He claims that he still can't believe that Kafka was Kaiju number 8 because he isn't even as fit as the average human. He tries to cheer up Ikai by cracking some jokes, but they don't help. The girl Kafka rescued earlier talks about how he saved her from the Kaiju and how he was always a source of fun during their training sessions. Furu agrees, but AI points out that regardless of their feelings, the decision will be made by headquarters. Izu taunts Hoshina for being a stickler for rules but admits that he is right. The fact that a human turned into a kaiju is a huge deal, and if it gets leaked, it could cause worldwide panic. This issue is too big for them to handle on their own. Meanwhile, Mina calls Four Eyes into her office and instructs her to compile a thick document she has prepared on Kafka to help his case. Hoshino is also quite distant, lacking his usual mischievous glint. When an officer reports to him about the clearing of the rubble, they suddenly ask what he thinks will happen to Kafka. Hoshino simply says that he wants Kafka back with them. He points out that during their earlier fight, Kafka wasn't using his full strength, and he didn't like Kafka's cheeky attitude. That's why he wants him back so they can fight at full strength next time. Hiko, too, is worried about Kafka. She nervously goes to her dad's office. Without looking at her, he asks what she wants. Hiko decides to address him as the Director General, not her dad. She salutes him and requests that Kafka not be disposed of because he saved her life. Director Isao calls her a fool and asks if she's there to discuss her failures. He hands her an envelope, and inside, Hiko finds an X-ray of Kafka's chest. In place of his heart is a core, clearly indicating he is a kaiju. Hiko is shocked, and Isao declares that Kafka is not human. He says that Kafka is a kaiju, just like the one who killed Kiko's mom. He tells her that if she understands, she should leave quickly. Hiko meekly obeys but stops midway, saying she still wants to believe in Kafka. Meanwhile, Kafka is in the high-security prison when a group of scientists visit him. He tries making small talk about the excessive tests, but no one responds. Dejected, Kafka thinks about Ikai and the others who are still waiting for him. He has too much to tell them, and that's why he can't give up. He is determined to return at any cost. Back at the base, the rest of the new officers receive harsh news. Nina informs them that they are being temporarily transferred to another base. After the recent kaiju attack, their base has lost most of its operational capacity, making it unsuitable for training newbie. On top of that, they have seen too many powerful kaiju recently, and the top officers believe that more disasters may be on their way. Mina explains that to prepare for such potential threats, top officers have decided to train their best talent across various units to strengthen them quickly. This includes Ikai and the others. However, Izu suspects another motive behind this decision. He asks Mina if they are being separated because of their close ties to Kafka or Kaiju number 8. He believes the top brass wants to separate and then observe them. Furu is shocked and tells Mina he won't obey the order if this is the case. Mina reassures them that this plan has been in the works for quite some time and has nothing to do with Kafka. Despite this, Furu and others are reluctant to leave the 3rd Division. Surprisingly, Ikai is the first to agree to the transfer, standing firm in his decision even after Furu tries to convince him otherwise. Later, Izu browses the contact list on his phone. When AI walks in, talking to someone with authority, he overhears AI saying that there's someone he wants to save at all costs and requests help. After the call ends, Izu points out that he overheard, but AI doesn't mind. As AI begins to leave, Izu calls him back, and they sit together. AI reveals he was talking to his former commander from his army days. Izu remarks that AI doesn't seem like someone who asks for personal favors. AI calmly replies that he doesn't want to lose anyone, and Kafka is a member of their 3rd division, just like everyone else. Back at the prison, Kafka thinks about Mina's words and realizes that the only way to secure his freedom is by proving he is human. The first step is to get others to listen to him. Just then, he gets visitors, and to his shock, director Isao has come to see him personally. Hiko watches this scene from the balcony along with Kaji and Juzo, who remark that Isao always handles important matters personally. Kafka is nervous but tries to convince Isao that he is not a kaiju. To everyone's surprise, Isao orders Kafka to be freed from his bindings and doesn't allow the control room staff to object. Isao knows that if Kafka is as powerful as rumored, he could break free from the bindings anytime he wanted. Kafka is sitting quietly because he chooses to. Once Kafka is freed, he feels hopeful that the director will listen. However, Isao already has his gun aimed at him. Isao shoots Kafka, who barely blocks the shots with his kaiju skin. Before Kafka can ask for an explanation, Isao grabs his stomach and tears apart flesh with his bare hands. He squeezes blood from the flesh into a test tube and declares that any creature capable of stopping bullets with its skin is a kaiju, not a human. However, Kafka gets back on his feet, feeling rebellious. He declares that he is not Kaiju number 8, but a human named Kafka. Hearing this, Isao decides to use his weapons. After passing through 2 rounds of security, the briefcases containing his iron gauntlets are open. As he dons the gloves, which were once body parts of Kaiju number 2, they begin to grow on him and merge with his nervous system. Isao feels a surge of strength and tells Kafka that if he is a human, he should die like one. Kafka, determined to prove his humanity, refuses to transform fully, using only his arm in Kaiju mode to defend himself. He then sees a giant energy hand coming toward him. Kafka dodges the attack by leaping away, but his Kaiju mode arm is torn off clean. As he is airborne, Isao launches a second attack, hitting him into the ceiling. Kafka lands on the ground, not realizing how much he has changed, when Isao suddenly attacks him again. This time, Kafka keeps up with Isao's pace and clearly avoids the attack. However, Isao chases after him, wrecking the prison in the process. Kafka plans to keep running until Isao's suit heats up, but Isao catches him off guard, blowing away his arm with a punch. Isao continues his onslaught, and Kafka dodges instinctively. He realizes that his body is reacting by itself, just like when he fought the mushroom kaiju before. Kafka suddenly understands that his body is reacting to Isao, as if he were a kaiju. The armor and gloves Isao uses are made from Kaiju number 2, a kaiju that destroyed an entire city overnight before being defeated in a bitter fight. The power of the gloves blows away Kafka's arms repeatedly, and then Isao hits him in the gut with a devastating punch. Kafka tries to run, but his legs have been blown off too. In the depths of despair, Kafka is hit with another powerful punch, creating a massive impact. However, he has had enough of running and being hit. He blocks the attack by turning into his Kaiju mode, but something seems to be wrong. His mask cracks, and he roars loudly, releasing a wave of energy that shatters the bulletproof glass of the control room. Isao quickly backs away, realizing the danger of facing Kaiju number 8 as Kafka starts transforming and growing in size. Kafka finds himself trapped deep within the Kaiju's mind, unable to control his body. He panics, realizing that at this rate, he will be proven to be a real Kaiju. Just then, the small parasite Kaiju that attacked him appears in front of him, telling him to kill all humans. Kaiju number 8 is now completely out of control and charges toward Isao, while Kiko can only scream at Kafka to stop, reminding him that he is a human. Sometime before all this, Iharu is worried about Ishikawa, suspecting he might be overworking himself. Ishikawa had agreed to transfer to another unit, and Iharu wonders if he isn't concerned about Kafka. Ishikawa explains that he wants to get stronger and must do it as quickly as possible. He can't achieve this if he stays, so he has to leave to protect Kafka next time, instead of Kafka having to protect him. Determined not to fall behind, Iharu vows to train hard as well. The platoon leaders arrive and explain that today is the day Kafka's fate will be decided. They are optimistic because they all wrote letters on Kafka's behalf. Mina has been summoned to headquarters as well, and they hope it's to give her good news. When Mina arrives at headquarters, she is told to wait as the Director General is currently examining Kafka. She goes to take a seat, but is informed that she's only there as an observer, and there is no seat for her. Back with Kafka, we see him struggling to maintain control. Hikaru tries to remind him that he is human. Shinomiya dodges Kafka's attacks, recognizing that Kafka is acting like an animal, not caring about leaving openings after his strikes. The reason becomes clear when Kafka breaks his own back to rotate and launch another attack. Shinomiya is shocked because Kafka used a move that destroys his own body, knowing he can regenerate. Kafka tries to stop himself, but it's no use as he unleashes a barrage of attacks. Shinomiya manages to create some distance, but realizes his life would have ended if it weren't for his armor. He uses an attack to send Kafka flying, but is stunned to see that Kafka used his body as a decoy and regenerated from his core behind him. This relentless style of fighting is taking its toll on Kafka, and he fears he won't survive. The two fighters collide, causing massive damage to the shelter, which is supposed to withstand attacks from a fortified Kaiju level 10. This level of destruction makes sense because Kafka, Kaiju number 8, is essentially fighting Kaiju number 2. Kikaru is amazed at Shinomiya's ability to fight a numbered Kaiju, but one of the directors notices something strange. Mina could have ended Kafka's life when he was in human form, but she seems to be pushing Kafka to test him. Kafka can't understand why, and Kiku is shocked as she begins to wonder if Mina is giving Kafka a chance to survive. Elsewhere, Kaguragi makes his case for why someone's background doesn't matter. He argues that their actions are what truly count, noting that Kafka saved his life before. Izumo finally agrees with him and looks at his father's phone number, contemplating making a call. Back at the fight, the intensity escalates, and Shinomiya takes some serious damage. The directors become concerned as it becomes clear that Kaiju number 8's fortitude is surpassing everyone's expectations. Kafka realizes that he has to stop himself, but it's no use. The fight rages on and becomes increasingly dangerous. Shinomiya lands a powerful attack, but this only enraged the beast. Kafka begs his Kaiju form to stop, but his Kaiju body seizes hold of Shinomiya. Kafka is sure that he will end up taking Shinomiya's life and sees how terrified Kikaru is. Kafka vows not to take Shinomiya's life right in front of Kikaru, but his Kaiju body continues to attack. Hikaru remembers the promise she made to eliminate Kafka if he started hurting humans, but she still wants to believe in him. She screams for Kafka not to give in to his Kaiju form, urging him to fight against it. The Kaiju is too much for him to overcome, and Kafka realizes that this is just how things always go for him. He always screws up at the most important moment. This proves to be the case once again as the Kaiju consumes him. Kaiju number 8 prepares its next attack, and Shinomiya determines that all is lost, as what he was hoping for won't happen. Kafka's body floats away as he loses hope, but he is shocked when he envisions Mina reaching out to him. He remembers that she said she would always be waiting for him, and Kafka's determination is restored. Blood flies everywhere as Kikaru watches Kaiju number 8 attack, but the blood is coming from the beast. Everyone is shocked because Kafka has just punched himself right through the chest. Kafka declares that he's not Kaiju number 8, he's Kafka Hibino. Everyone watching falls silent from shock as Kafka collapses and reverts back to human form. Shinomiya must tell one of his men named Narumi to put his weapon away. Narumi begrudgingly lowers his weapon, revealing that he is the Defense Force 1st Division captain. He points out that Shinomiya never signaled for backup, suggesting that he was intentionally putting his life at risk. Shinomiya retorts that he had everything under control but admits that Kaiju number 8 was stronger than he anticipated. Shinomiya then calls for medics to retrieve Kaiju number 8. Narumi wonders aloud what Shinomiya plans to do with him. After Kafka's examination, the directors convene, seeking Mina's opinion on Kaiju number 8, given her position as his commanding officer. They acknowledge that she knew Kafka even before their time in the Defense Force and clarify that her testimony won't influence Kafka's fate, which is essentially already decided. Mina confirms that Kafka never received special treatment from her, as evidenced by his failure during the entrance exams. One director notes that they just need her report for formalities. Mina states that professionals should determine whether Kafka is human or Kaiju, but she will share her observations of Kafka as a Defense Force officer. She describes Kafka as a hard worker who has saved his comrades multiple times, particularly during Kaiju number 10's attack. The directors counter that these feats were possible only due to his Kaiju power, reinforcing their belief that Kafka is a Kaiju. Mina surprisingly agrees with their assessment but clarifies that Kafka succeeded because he never gave up. Despite failing the exam multiple times and discovering his unleashed combat power was 0%, he persisted. Even as a Kaiju, Kafka continued trying to save people. Mina emphasizes that Kafka cares deeply for others, more than anyone else she knows. She recalls how Kafka was there for her after losing Miko, feeling her pain and supporting her. Mina asserts that Kafka's humanity should be the deciding factor in whether they can trust him. The council, however, dismisses this notion as too vague. Shinomiya thanks her for her input and dismisses her, revealing that they only sought her opinion to avoid accusations of making a harsh decision without due process. They are now ready to dispose of Kaiju number 8, but ultimately, the final decision rests with Shinomiya. Kafka, meanwhile, reflects on his vow to make the Kaiju pay for making Mina cry. When he seemed on the verge of fully transforming into a kaiju, he decided to end his life while he still had control. Moments later, he is shocked to find himself still alive. Shinomiya sees Kafka's distress and reassures him that he's not there to harm him. Kafka, relieved, is just glad he didn't end Shinomiya's life, as he would never be able to face Kikoru again if he had. Kafka wonders if the decision has been made to accept him as human, but Shinomiya points out that Kafka wouldn't be alive if he had the frail heart of a human. The council has determined that Kafka is indeed a kaiju, but they haven't decided yet if he is a threat. Most members oppose letting him live, but Shinomiya opted not to convert Kafka into weaponry. Instead, they will have him fight for them, which upset the council. However, Shinomiya convinced them that Kafka could be controlled, as evidenced by his time with the defense force. Others express concern because there is no precedent for what Shinomiya wants to do. He asserts that they can't worry about that, as more Daikeiju are appearing. If a swarm of kaiju emerges in numbers exceeding expectations, the nation could be wiped out easily. The only way they might stand a chance is by utilizing Kafka's incredible power. The council begrudgingly accepts Shinomiya's decision, but makes it clear they are not happy about it. Shinomiya calls Kafka by his name for the first time, telling him to prove his worth if he wants to survive. It's clear they intend to use him as a weapon, but Kafka declares that he's a defense force officer and will make them accept him as such. Mina and Kikoru hear the good news. Kikoru, however, knows she can't just be happy. She needs to get stronger to stop Kafka if necessary. Kaguragi informs Izumo that his father wasn't behind the decision, and Izumo is amazed that Kafka achieved this victory on his own. The other officers are ecstatic, with Ikikawa declaring he knew this would happen all along. Hashina explains to Konami that the hard part is just beginning. If people find out they have a kaiju on the force, it could get bad. Kafka will need to prove himself useful enough that no one refuses his help. Kafka is exhausted in the hospital, but he reminds himself that Mina is waiting for him. Elsewhere, Kafka's old buddies are amazed by someone named Number 9, who has quickly reached the top of the online chess leaderboard. This person is actually Kaiju Number 9, using the game to gauge humanity's intellectual level. Having completed his assessment, Number 9 determines that humanity's weapon is the ability to accumulate knowledge across generations. He has figured out the configuration of the defense force base and decides it's time to move his plan to the next phase. He isn't alone, and he tells his other self that it's time to reclaim the kaiju power that fell into human hands. This brings an end to our anime. If you enjoyed it, then don't forget to like, share, and subscribe our channel for anime recaps.